Welcome everyone to the July 14th, 2020 Ogden City Council meeting. Please let the record reflect that all council members are present with the exception of Councilmember Lopez and Vice Chair Blair. To start this evening, I neglected to ask if anybody would recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm not sure if Councilmember Heyer would like to do it again or if there's any volunteers.
I'd be happy to do it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Oh, you know what? I forgot to read the electronic meeting determination. It's the first thing on my list. Let me do that first. Sorry. I thought I had it all together. Great. So this is a council chair determination to hold electronic meetings without an anchor location. I, Angela Burqa, Chair of the Ogden City Council, hereby make the determination pursuant to Utah Code annotated 52-4-2074 that holding a public meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present due to the infectious nature and potentially dangerous health effects of contracting the COVID-19 virus. This determination runs through July 31st, 2020. All public council meetings, including work sessions, will be held electronically through July 31st, 2020. The situation will be reevaluated at that time to determine whether the risk of meeting with an anchor location has subsided. Information on how to connect to the public meetings will be posted on each agenda. The public may comment during the electronic meeting during public hearings or provide public input on items designated for input on the agenda. General public comments will also be taken during the regular meetings. Written public comments may be submitted through the following electronic options: telephonic message at 801-629-8158, public comment submission form at ogdencity.com/public input, or by email at citycouncil@ogdencity.com. Thank you for bearing with me for that. We'll let you go ahead and recite the pledge, Rich.
Would everybody rise and recite the pledge with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. And now please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you for that. Now, first up on our agenda, we have the common consent item of the arts grants. This is to set a public hearing for August 4th, 2020. Any questions about that? Sorry, I just pulled up the wrong agenda, so you just have to give me a minute. Sorry. Okay, I'd be happy to entertain any motions on that item.
Chair, I make a motion that we adopt the proposed resolution 2020-21 under common consent.
I'll second.
So I have a motion by Councilmember White and a second by Councilmember Heyer to set the public hearing for proposed resolution 2020-21, August 4th, 2020. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That does help that there's a little bit fewer of us out there. So now for the main event this evening, we invite Clint Spencer, a planner, to talk with us about the Southeast Ogden Community Plan. Welcome. And it looks like you're all set up and ready to go.
Yeah, I got ahead of the curve a little bit there, so appreciate the having one item ahead. It's good to be with you. With you, right? Over video. And for those who are in our meeting today, this meeting feels like a long time coming. So we're glad that everybody's here, and I look forward to some more public participation as we talk about the Southeast Ogden Community Plan update. So I'm just going to get right into it, and we'll see what happens here. So Southeast Ogden, pretty self-explanatory where it's at, highlighted in yellow here, represents about 12% of the city limits, and it also represents about 11% of the population of Ogden. The first plan was adopted in 1987, and then several renditions and several amendments have taken place since then. Highlighted in red here is the last potential petition that was proposed to amend accessory dwelling units in Southeast Ogden. And it was this petition, when it got to the city council, that kind of kicked off or initiated the council to direct staff to update the plan. It hadn't been really overhauled for quite some time. It's been, almost 32, almost 33 years since the plan had been overhauled. So it was time to take a look at it, and accessory dwelling units was one of the issues that was proposed to be looked at and has been looked at, and the community has come together and figured out how they would like to address that. So what is a community plan? We have several communities in the city. I think there's about 14 communities in Ogden. And a vision statement for this would just be, how do we want development to look like in the future? Each of these community plans are tailored to a specific area. In this instance, it's Southeast Ogden. And it's designed to address the needs and issues of a specific area in terms of the built environment. It can address all of the needs and issues, but specifically the built environment, how that community is going to develop over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And then the plan is implemented or adopted into the general plan, which is what we're here hopefully to accomplish tonight. And as we've met with residents and folks in the Southeast Ogden community, some of the issues that we saw come up were ADUs first off, and student housing. And we have kind of clumped those together under a housing initiative. And then we also have other concerns with traffic, open space, and then future land use. How each of these issues will play into the future of the Southeast Ogden area. So the implementation of a community plan is essentially like a general plan. A community plan is meant for guidance in terms of development in the future. These concepts for future development are then how the staff and city helps put together goals and objectives. And then these goals and objectives help shape the future in terms of shaping specific zoning ordinance amendments that we'll talk about one of those tonight, specific to accessory dwelling units. And then looking at rezones. It also helps identify potential budget decisions of what improvements need to take place in the community. And then it also helps to establish partnerships created or desired from the community plan. And as we've worked through this community plan, we have worked with several organizations. We worked closely with McKay and then Weber State as well. And with the implementation of the BRT, there's been UTA involvement. So we've built some good relationships that we hope will be beneficial down the road to the Southeast Ogden area. So from that 1987 plan, these are some of the accomplishments that took place. I'll just let you read through some of those, but while you're reading through those, give maybe an explanation of the expectations of a community plan. And it's not necessarily, we're not trying to create a crystal ball, but we're trying to create some direction and trying to reflect the desires of folks that have invested, especially people that buy single family homes or townhomes or live in apartments. People that live there have made a significant investment of their time and their life to this part of town, and we want them to have a say in how things take place and how things unfold in their communities. So what's changed? Since 1987, a lot has changed in the Southeast Ogden area. It was quite undeveloped at the time. Since 1987, 11 and a half miles of new road, 119 new subdivisions, 941 new buildings, 893 of them being homes, and then over 3,000 people. So that is a significant change to the Southeast Ogden area. And, and it really begged for this plan to be updated. I'm just going to say it's a little different giving a presentation in my empty office than it is in front of, the people that have been involved in this process. So it's a little, it's a little strange, and I hope that everybody's following along and participating and understanding what I'm talking about. The community involvement in this process has been, we feel, has been pretty good. We met initially with students back in March of 2018 to get an idea of what they thought student housing should look like, how that should take place, what were the concerns, what were the needs, and to kind of get a pulse on what was taking place currently. And then, as I mentioned before this, there was the process of amending the ADU ordinance in the Southeast Ogden plan, and that included quite a bit of community involvement as well. So as we look to kick off this plan, one of the first things that we did, and this was a new initiative for this community plan, was to establish a community plan website where we could put information, put meeting updates, put our presentations, meeting notes, and put some information on there that the community could go to get a good idea of what's taking place in their community. I think we have crime stats on there, and some other important, some zoning information as well. So just some important information that I think anybody would want to know about the community they live in. From that, after that website was put in place, we came up with some survey questions that we put on there. And then we got a pretty good response from that. I don't have the response right here, but I want to say it was around 250 responses from that community survey. And then from that, it kind of helped us to establish as a staff what were the main issues from the community that we saw developing. We held our first open house meeting in January of 2019. Over 2,500 notices were sent. We utilized our social media, the city website, and we had a pretty good turnout of 100 plus residents, which in my planning experience, of 18 years, I've not witnessed that good of a turnout for this type of meeting. So we feel like we had good public participation as we went along. So from that original open house meeting, and from the comments that we received before and during the meeting, we established 4 essential steering committees. First was land use, transportation, housing, and open space. And we placed staff members involved at the head of these steering committees. And we held we each held 2 meetings with our steering committees. And these are to kind of flesh out the specifics, to kind of get into the nitty gritty of the details. What were the real issues of the plan? How we're going to go about resolving them? And most of these meetings were probably well over a couple of hours, and were fairly well attended. I was over the housing committee, and each time we met, I think we had more than 10 people on that really well represented the committee or the community. It wasn't one geographic area, but it gave a pretty good representation of the entire community. And each of those meetings went for at least probably 2.5 hours. And I don't know that we ever had any uncomfortable silences. It was a pretty verbal experience. So we appreciate the input and the information that we got back from the community from those steering committee meetings. In the interim, we also met with Weber State to kind of get a pulse on how they saw future student housing unfolding. This is the information we got back from them. They've experienced a pretty small growth rate currently, about 3%. and they feel like they have enough housing to accommodate for the next 5 to 10 years. It's their desire essentially to work with the city and private development to create additional student housing. And one of the reasons that they mention that is they feel like private development could provide more attractive amenities than they could. And so we were glad to get that input from them and implement that into the plan. So after we had this initial open house meeting, our steering committee meetings, and met with all the other organizations, we put that information together and formed it into a plan the best we could. And we took that to the community in our second open house meeting, which was in September. Again, we sent out 2,500 notices. Same process was followed in terms of social media, the city website. We also placed, I believe, about 5 or 6 signs throughout the community to let them know of the meeting, where it was going to take place, when it was going to take place. And in the second meeting, we had about 60 plus residents in attendance. And this is a picture of that. It was held at the elementary school there. Just as a note, in this particular photo, this is Ms. Markeski, that she's up presenting from the housing. She was on the housing committee meeting, or housing steering committee, and she is up presenting what the housing committee plan came up with. So it was great to have her participation as well as everyone else's. But so speaking of people that are on committees, I'm just going to show, these are the folks that we had involved in the plan. Leave this up for just a couple of moments so you can go through there, and I just want to make sure that we acknowledge people. If we have left somebody out, I apologize for that. We tried to do our best in terms of keeping records, and but we do feel like the people that were involved in the steering committee meetings did provide really good information and were very helpful in shaping this community plan. So with all this participation and all this taking place, what did us all accomplish? And that would be the Southeast Ogden Community Plan. So after 32 years, we have a plan in place that we can move forward with for the next, hopefully not 32 years, hopefully the next maybe 10, 15 years, and we'll have to see how time unfolds and what changes. But that being said, I'm going to walk through the community plan, some of the objectives and strategies, taking it one issue at a time. So the first issue we're looking at is land use. And the vision statement for this that the steering committee helped put together was for Southeast Ogden to be a community that strengthens single-family neighborhoods, protects trails and open spaces with appropriate zoning, and encourages quality, unique, commercial, and multifamily developments along Harrison Boulevard and the BRT route. So as they met together, as we looked at land use in the Southeast Ogden area, one of the discrepancies we noticed was the amount of amenities available for students. And so along with amenities is also housing. So as part of the objectives and goals is to support more commercial and mixed-use developments near Weber State, and to create some more service amenities for those students that attend there to be able to utilize and enjoy. I know going to Utah State, there wasn't a whole lot real close to campus, but there was quite a bit in the downtown area that I could enjoy in Logan, and providing that kind of experience, having that large of a student population and being able to keep their money close to town would be helpful to not only the city, but provide the services to the students as well. We are also in the plan wanting to encourage and working with Weber State to develop other commercial and other amenity opportunities on campus. As was noted, there is the bus rapid transit line that's coming directly through Weber State University campus. and then kind of skirting around and terminating at the McKay-Dee Hospital site. And with this BRT comes an opportunity to create some transit-oriented development. And what that means is looking at people that want to utilize that BRT line, or they want to locate close to good transportation opportunities, and providing some more high density opportunities to be a part of that. That's something that we're looking at as well as we start revising the East Central Community Plan, which will be our next initiative we're kicking off here in the next month or so. So those TOD standards will be beneficial to people using the BRT line, and it will help build off of that BRT experience. Another part of the land use plan was to support new and existing multifamily and commercial developments along Harrison Boulevard. So there's quite a bit of commercial development along the Harrison Boulevard corridor, and this would just continue to expand that and to allow for redevelopment opportunities, allow for multifamily housing options, which would speak directly to student housing needs as well in the future. And as those as those commercial uses go in place, to also be mindful of adjacent single-family neighborhoods or residential neighborhoods, and making sure that we are still providing adequate and appropriate buffers from those commercial uses to residential zones. This was sent to me, we received an email, I guess I should say, today about protecting natural open spaces. And, especially in consideration of fire and those kinds of things. But looking at opportunities to annex unincorporated properties on the East Bench into the city, and protecting those, our existing trailheads and zoning them. And then part of this plan as well is to go through and identify non-buildable areas on the bench, and maintain those areas as open space, and maintain those views of the mountains from the southeast Ogden area. So this next theme, protect single-family neighborhoods, is a theme that you'll see throughout this plan, and it really speaks to, as I mentioned before, in terms of land use, just enforcing buffers between single-family and commercial and multifamily developments, making sure that whatever kind of commercial activity or multifamily housing activity takes place, it doesn't detract from the single-family experience, and continues to protect that experience for single-family neighborhoods. And this would be in terms of new development, and as well as looking at opportunities to improve existing situations where commercial and neighborhood and single-family neighborhoods exist together. This is another objective is to support improvements and redevelopment to existing multifamily and commercial properties. And I kind of spoke to this a little bit of just looking at what we have already in terms of commercial. How can we add to that? Where can we redevelop? What can we do to promote redevelopment? And part of that would be to allow or support mixed-use zoning to hopefully attract some redevelopment opportunities to take place. And one of the initiatives that we as a staff have been working on for quite some time, and have now gotten direction from the community as well, is to look at revising sign ordinances along Harrison Boulevard to make sure that the signage that takes place on that boulevard doesn't take away from the natural beauty of the area, and maybe considering lowering signs and implementing more monument type signs to help beautify that corridor. Okay, so housing, and I think this is kind of the meat of the discussion here. So the vision statement from the Housing Committee is to preserve existing single-family neighborhoods while providing additional housing options for the future growth anticipated in the Southeast Ogden community over the next 10 to 15 years. So this housing initiative, again, speaks to student housing options. It speaks to current or future population growth needs, and then to accessory dwelling units as well, which was one of the major concerns. This is a slide that I've shown, I don't know, probably a dozen times in a dozen different presentations, and it's to hopefully help give an idea of what is a rental and what is an accessory dwelling unit. So I'm going to walk through it one more time, hopefully provide some better context. So we're going to try to make this as clear as we can for everybody involved. So on the left of this dark bar here, you have a rental or a duplex. On the right, you have an owner-occupied accessory dwelling unit. So one of the primary differences is in a rental or in a duplex, the owner does not have to be there. They can be, but they are not required to be on site. In an accessory dwelling unit, the owner is required to live on the property, and it needs to be their main primary residence. So for a rental unit, the first unit, in terms of how we define a single family, so it's one single family per unit. Say for instance, you have your typical family, mom, dad, kids, and then you could have other grown adults in the home as well. This could be related mom and dad. It could be adult children. It could be, people that are just staying there without paying rent, whatever the case might be. In the first unit of an owner-occupied accessory dwelling unit, the same amount of people can reside there. So that first unit is essentially the same. So the second unit of a rental or a duplex is same as the first. So mom, dad, adult kids, or whoever the case might be. So the difference here in an accessory dwelling unit that's rented. So some people, you could have a mother-in-law apartment where you have maybe you're caring for an elderly person or another family member that's living with you that's not paying rent. That is not an accessory dwelling unit. An accessory dwelling unit is specifically when it's rented out, and it is limited to 2 adults and minor children. So this other adult that is usually permitted in other single-family units would not be permitted in an accessory dwelling unit.
Thanks for, sorry to interrupt, Clint, but I noticed that today in the podcast when I listened to it, I had not realized that if you have a mother-in-law apartment and it's actually your mother-in-law living in it, that it doesn't qualify as an ADU where you would have to get it, licensed, right? So I think that was a big difference that I didn't even understand. After all these conversations we've had, I didn't understand that in order to be an ADU, it had to be rented to someone. Good. And as part of establishing an accessory dwelling unit process, or the process you have to go through, is you have to establish that those living quarters are safe. And so we come in doing an inspection, and that has actually proven to be very useful. We don't have a lot of accessory dwelling units on the books, but we do this same requirement for any type of rental, and it just helps to ensure that those dwelling units that we're approving, whether they be accessory dwelling units or other rentals, that they're safe for occupants and they're not going to create a safety issue for the folks that live in them. So as the committee met and we discussed this, and like I said, there wasn't a dull moment in the discussions that we had. One of the main objectives that came out of those discussions was they wanted to protect and preserve the existing single-family housing. So the concern from the committee initially was the proximity to Weber State, and some of the committee members had seen other universities and housing around it, and how the proximity has affected single-family neighborhoods, and they didn't want those things to happen in their neighborhoods. And so, they were concerned that allowing an excessive amount of accessory dwelling units would have a negative impact in their area. And as we talked more and kind of got a better understanding of what exactly is an accessory dwelling unit, and in a perfect world, it probably wouldn't be an issue. But opening that up to everybody in the community didn't sit well with the
with the folks that were concerned about their neighborhoods being downtrodden and being overpopulated with accessory dwelling units. So we kind of looked at breaking the solution we came up with is breaking down the Southeast Ogden area into different communities. And this isn't what we're implementing tonight. We're not talking about how many can go in each of these areas, but just setting the standard that this is how the process will move forward. So, looking at these different areas. So, for example, the Northwest neighborhood, they already had come forward and petitioned for accessory dwelling units, so they're allowed to maintain and to continue having accessory dwelling units. That's supported in the plan. These other areas, College Heights, Forest Green, the South area, and then there may be other areas as we get into the actual zoning ordinance implementation, which will take place after the community plan is adopted. And then we'll look at specific numbers and say, okay, how are we going to regulate accessory dwelling units for each of these specific areas? Are these the areas that we want to regulate? Are there more areas? Or we'll kind of get into the finer details and the zoning amendment process, which takes place after the community plan is implemented. So we're hoping to have, it says here, we're hoping to have that complete by summer or fall of 2020, but that we're probably looking more at fall or winter of 2020, possibly 2021, early 2021. As part of accessory dwelling units, one of the main concerns that came up was how do we enforce these? We talked, it's very difficult for our code service folks to go in, and they can't go into homes and figure out who's there. And if they approach a door and say, are you all related? And they say yes, then that's about the extent as we can go. But we want to look at other ways that we can maybe give our accessory dwelling unit ordinance a little more teeth. Part of that is looking at other ordinances, which we have been doing. And then one of the thoughts that we have started to implement is providing an online and searchable database of legal ADUs. And so this would be in the form of, where people could go, and this is just an example of what that website might look like, but people could go and to the White City website and look at a map that has legal accessory dwelling units. So if their neighbor starts doing something that they think is questionable, they can go and say, okay, I'm going to look and see if this is legal. And then if it's not legal, provide a reporting option that they can come back and whether they want to be identified or not, they can say, hey, my neighbor is doing this. And then that will create a case for our code service people to follow up on. Another part of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance that we would implement is recording a certificate at the county that states that even though this is being used as an accessory dwelling unit, it is a single family residence. So as a homeowner comes in and establishes an accessory dwelling unit, and they move out, they can't sell that as a duplex. They can't sell it. It's not recognized as a duplex at the county or at the city level. It's recognized as a single family home that either has a livable space for a relative or a potential accessory dwelling unit. But they would have to go, the new owner, when they purchase that home, would have to go back through the process to reestablish those accessory dwelling unit rights. They'd have to go back through the inspection process, make sure that it was up to code, and then go through the business license process and obtain a rental license for that accessory dwelling unit. Currently, I looked today and we have 3 approved accessory dwelling units and 2 others that are being reviewed. And I'm sure that everybody on this call would probably imagine that there are several more than, and when I say several more accessory dwelling units, they may be just illegal rentals in general and not necessarily accessory dwelling units as we've tried to define here.
Hey, Clint, do you mind? Oh, sorry, maybe you're going to talk about it next, but I was just wondering, is there something that shows where all the rental properties are as well? Are we going to do that next?
I'm not going to be talking about that, but that is something that we are. So I think that we've started looking at this Just in terms of accessory dwelling units, we're going to try to put something together for vacation rentals as well. And discussion has come up that maybe we should do this for all rental licenses in the city. I know that's a very large database. That would be a lot of information to put together and to put onto a website. But I think that we're trying to provide as much information as we can to the community, so people don't have to rely on coming to the city. They can look it up themselves and get an idea and a pulse on what is happening in their own neighborhoods. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then I wanted to, if you don't mind, if I just make a little announcement really quickly. I just noticed that one participant has their hand raised, and we will be doing public input on this item, but I just didn't want them to think that we were going to interrupt and start having public comment during your presentation, even though I'm interrupting you. So I'm doing that. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure they didn't get frustrated because there will be time for public input after the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, we've had a lot of public participation, and we would continue to expect that with this plan. So,
hey, Clint, can you tell me the process by which those 5 ADUs? What does one from a person applying to get the ADU license, and then what do you go through on your side to either approve or disapprove of those? So start like from the side of, if I wanted to do an ADU, what would the process look like on my end?
So there's an application process. Essentially, you would need to provide floor plans showing where your bedrooms are, where your entrances are going to be. If it's a detached structure, whether it's part of your basement, those are all options that could take place. And then as a staff, we look at, there's limits in terms of how large and how small it can be if it's detached, and if it's part of the home, how much of the home it can occupy. We would make sure that the entrances take place where they need to, make sure it's in an area that is zoned to allow for accessory dwelling units. And then we essentially move that on to the business licensing folks, and they take that business license process and make sure that it gets finished.
Thanks.
That's kind of a rough idea.
Is there fire regulations also that you look at?
When you say fire regulations, are you talking about like building safety?
No, the windows, the recessed windows, and that in the place.
Yeah, that is part of the inspection that takes place. So once somebody comes in and applies for, and this is the same with vacation rentals, accessory dwelling units, and rental units in general, we need to make sure that those are up to code, that there's appropriate and that there's enough egress and access to get out, if needs be. So yeah, that is part of the process for sure. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving on here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. So we'll talk about some student housing and other high density types in the community plan. So again, we want to make sure these are implemented without doing harm to the single family and lower density residential neighborhoods. And we've kind of begun this process already. We're in a process now. We have a pending ordinance to look at apartment and multifamily development in our commercial zones and our C2 and our C3 zones. And what we're trying to establish is a better way to do it. Some of the ordinances we have in place now have allowed for some undesirable development that's taken place. And so we kind of put a pause button on that. And we're looking at ways that we can improve the multifamily development that takes place so that people that live in those developments can enjoy a higher quality of life than what's currently being proposed in some, not all. There's a lot of good development, multifamily development, but there are some multi-developments that don't provide much more amenities than a room to live in and a parking stall. So we would look at doing that for student housing as well, looking at what kinds of amenities would be attractive to students. We would look at, as part of this plan, it would support looking at a student housing overlay that would, give some additional regulations in terms of how many people can occupy a unit, and maybe allowing up to 4 people per unit along Harrison Boulevard. Also looking at utilizing transit-oriented development, or the TOD zones, as part of student housing. And then I'll talk about this a little later, give a better depiction. So if there's an area in the southeast part of the Weber State campus where the BRT cuts through a residential neighborhood, and it kind of dissects it. And I'll show that in a later slide, but what the plan, how it addresses that. Also, here it is. So you can see the BRT route is this dark gray line. On the north side, I think this is Country Hills. On the north side of Country Hills, we would allow for the multifamily development to take place there. On the south side, however, there's a fairly intact a fairly intact single-family neighborhood. And so the plan would only support rezoning that for multifamily use if all of these properties shown on the map are included. We felt like on the north side of Country Hills Drive, where it's directly adjacent to Weber State, it's really separated from the single-family neighborhoods to the east. But this would, and I think that Weber State owns most of these homes in here, anyways. But this would be a good area for some multifamily housing to occur. So that was the housing portion. We'll get into open space now, and everybody loves open space. So this should be a breeze. So Southeast Ogden, being a community where all people can enjoy open spaces, including parks and trails, which provide accessibility, amenities, and green space preservation. So one of the challenges with the Southeast Ogden area is that it's mostly built out, and there's not a lot of new opportunities for large-scale parks. Most of the parks we have, and most of the proposals in the plan are looking at what we have now and making improvements to those, making sure that they're maintained, recommending new amenities for some of the parks. And if you'll notice here, so we've got improvements for Grandview, for Forest Green, for Browning Park, and then this last one, what we're calling College Park. And this is kind of the way that we're looking at addressing open space, is to implement pocket parks in the community. And what a pocket park is it's just a smaller scale park, right? So taking an area that's maybe not utilized for anything. We're looking at one of the areas as a detention area. Another area is kind of a large traffic island, but looking at how can we utilize those spaces to provide some sort of amenity that people can get out and enjoy. As I mentioned, the plan looks at maintaining and upgrading Forest Green, Glassman Pond, and Buse Pond, making sure that those areas are maintained. For Glassman, adding a property barrier to clearly identify what is it with the city's property versus private property. Upgrading the playground equipment in Forest Green, and then making sure that Buse Pond stays clean. And apparently there was a rodent issue that came up during the community plan discussion that we would like to see addressed as well, or that they would like to see addressed. So as I mentioned, this is the provision for these pocket parks. And basically this is taking underutilized small open spaces that, if you'll just excuse me for a minute. I've got to close my door.
At least we know they're still cleaning the office.
Yeah, sorry about that. She apologized, but I should have shut my door before. Okay, so back into pocket parks. So we would look at, somehow rezoning these areas to the O1 zone, and then One of the desires from the community was to utilize water-wise landscaping. So making it where there's not a lot of water use and maybe providing more pathways and rock gardens and those kinds of things for enjoyment. And then providing funding for those improvements to take place down the road. Another provision in the open space portion of the plan is improving trailheads in the community. It's hard to see in this picture on the bottom right here, but one on the sign to the left, it says, "Welcome to our trail system." And then on the right, there's a sign that says, "No parking," and I think it says trespassing or no trespassing or something like that. So it's kind of a confusing message there. And so we want to make sure that those the access to the trails is well identified, making parking improvements where we need to, and clarifying our signs to make sure that people know where those trail accesses are available. And then I think part of any open space improvement is to make connections between those open spaces. The plan looks at working with property owners around Skyline Drive to Shadow Valley to include a trail connection for Birch Creek, and then ensure that privacy mitigation and buffering as those trail connections take place. Possibly installing fencing or property markers to reduce encroachments into the trailway. And in these kinds of instances, we wouldn't. This isn't where we're going to go and take property. We would work in cooperation with folks that want to cooperate to acquire easements or other ways to gain access to private property and make these connections possible. Again, working with property owners to make a connection between Buse Pond and Buse Canyon Trailhead, and then providing connections to Grandview Park, and then requiring open space with new development. So on to transportation. The vision statement there is Southeast Ogden is a community where all people can enjoy transportation choices that fit their needs and an infrastructure that supports safety, accessibility, and connected neighborhoods. So recently, the city has adopted so we have a transportation master plan that's been updated and a bicycle master plan that's been updated. And the transportation portion of the Southeast Ogden plan would look at implementing those recommendations and the recommendations of those plans into the Southeast Ogden area. This would include providing more bicycle infrastructure for parking and then also for protected bike lanes on Harrison Boulevard. Again, these improvements would take place over time as new development happens. As opportunities arise, we would want to look at making sure these things take place and really trying to improve the biking options and possibilities in Southeast Ogden. These are some of the recommendations from the bicycle master plan, looking at ways to implement bike lanes on the downhill slopes of Shadow Valley Drive, adding a connectivity bike lane from Shadow Valley to 4600 South, which is what the diagram on the right here is kind of representing. And then looking at creative ways to deal with physical limitations on Country Hills Drive from Buse Pond north to provide bike protection on the downslope there. And then with any transportation plan, we want to look at how can we improve traffic flow through the community. We would look at improving access in and out of Weber State, finding ways that we can create better connectivity to the D events, connecting 4600 North or 4600 South, with Country Hills Drive as the BRT develops, and then exploring safe and legal routes as the BRT develops to create a designated route from Country Hills to Village Drive. And then there's an opportunity here behind the Burger King and Credit Union to provide an additional connection there as well. And then the transportation plan also looks at making the missing connections, right? So from Navajo Drive to 5025 South, Ridgedale Drive with the Bonneville Terrace Drive, Glassman Way to 4200 South, and then determining an appropriate connection for the Eccles Avenue near 3900 South to replace the unofficial pattern connecting Eccles through the IHC property. And then another part of the plan is to look at addressing spot issues. So where do people have concerns, which is what a lot of the folks came out and wanted to have their specific area looked at, and how do we address speeding in different areas, and whether it's on Taylor Avenue or Shadow Valley, Country Hill Drives, looking at ways that we can implement traffic control measures to make transportation and pedestrian and bike travel all work together and be safer in those areas. A lot of that is working more closely with traffic enforcement and our engineering department, and determining options for installing these bulb outs that to kind of reduce traffic lanes and slow traffic down a little bit, or looking at parking permits and other types of options to help resolve these issues. Skyline Drive was another one that came up as well. This was a recent connection that's taken place, and we've had a lot of speeding concerns from the community. So how do we, the plan kind of addresses how to resolve that. It also looks at addressing the traffic backup on Harrison, at Country Hills in Harrison, and working. This is where we would work in partnership with UTA to design solutions at intersections to help signalized turns work better in that area. Along Old Post Road, there's a new development called Moda Vista. It's a fairly large development, I believe 79 units, if I'm not mistaken. And that will likely have a traffic impact in the area. So how we want to just make sure that we maintain a visible approach for Moda Vista as that development takes place, so traffic is safe getting in and out of that development. And then again, looking at speeding on west of Harrison Boulevard. Last but not least, we want to look at improving pedestrian safety. And this is, you think about Harrison Boulevard and you don't really think about that's a great place to walk. It's a very heavily traveled corridor in terms of traffic. And we want to make sure that it's safe and it's attractive to bikes and pedestrians and cars. And so the plan walks through, some measures on how to make that a better walking environment. It looks at closing up some of the gaps where sidewalk doesn't exist, and then on Harrison Boulevard specifically, maybe looking at pedestrian opportunities when blocks get longer than 1,000 feet. Maybe some mid-block crossings, widening the sidewalks to 6 feet instead of, I think they're maybe 4 feet now. Building better buffers, and then exploring pedestrian crossings from McKay to Weber State. And as we looked at that, we thought about maybe adding a sidewalk where necessary, and then possibly a pedestrian bridge over Harrison to connect those, kind of the east side of the Southeast Ogden community to the west side of Ogden, or the Southeast Ogden community. It also looks at working with the Safe Routes to School plan, and then looking at ADA standards throughout the community, and making sure that locations that are not safe or not attractive for ADA folks, that they can have a safe and an attractive place to travel. Make sure that we correct things that are not right. They're not, they should be better. I like this picture on the left here, and this isn't Ogden, but that's not to say that it's not in Ogden as well. But those kinds of situations always, those are things that we're trying to avoid and trying to improve with this portion of the community plan to make sure that pedestrian travel for everybody, whether it's ADA folks or bicyclists or regular pedestrians, that those are all met. And then one of the concerns is that as we went through this plan is people weren't aware of how, if they had a pothole to report or a missing sidewalk issue that they wanted to resolve, how could we go about doing that? And we looked at other communities across the United States, and there are several that have a place where it's very identifiable. It's easy to find on a website, and community members could go there and just type in a comment. Hey, there's a pothole on Taylor that I would like to look at, or there's a spot on Harrison Boulevard that needs repair, or whatever the case may be. But making sure that the people in the community have a place that they can report that, so that the city is aware of those improvements that need to be made. Now, that's not saying that we can go out that day or that week, or maybe even within months to a year to correct that, but at least we'll be aware of it, so that when funding options come up, we can help prioritize where those funds go in terms of making those improvements throughout the community and throughout the city. And then also as part of the implementation or the transportation plan is integrating the BRT, looking at, and this goes to kind of what I've spoken to already, but looking at those TOD zone opportunities, coordinate with UTA to notify residents about bus changes. While the BRT is going in, looking for opportunities to install protected bike lanes, creating a parking ride at the event center, and then the BRT gets you to a lot of places, but it doesn't get you everywhere. And so looking at ways that people can get from a stop to where they're going, they refer to that as creating just a first and last mile solutions, making sure that people can get where they want to get. So here's the process for the plan. It's super simplified. It's been a much more complex process than this, but we've had our first open house meeting, steering committee meetings. We're working on plan development, and then the second open house meeting. The Planning Commission, I think, looked at this in December last year and approved the plan unanimously. And then this is where we're at tonight, is the City Council recommendation. Now, after this, the plan goals will begin to be implemented, and that will begin this year. So the next step for the community plan, if it's adopted, is looking at zoning amendments to address the ADU issues. That's when we'll get into the exact, ADA thresholds for specific areas, and making other amendments to the ADU ordinance that will hopefully make that ordinance better and more enforceable and more understandable. We would also look at zoning amendments for the TOD overlay as we work on that with the East Central plan as well. And then looking at zoning amendments for student housing and, where should that overlay zone take place, and kind of getting into the details of that overlay as well. So I have spoken probably more than I have in a day. So if anybody has any questions, I would gladly answer them. But I can.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Clint. We really appreciate your thorough presentation, and it's really good to review it all again. It's been a little while since I read the whole plan, before we had this meeting, so it's nice just to get some more updates. I wonder if any council members have questions before we open for public input.
I just have one, Chair. Clint, did you review again the commercial component in this community plan? I know there's one on 32nd Street, or what part does commercial be part of this plan?
So the commercial component of the plan is handled in the land use portion, and that portion of the plan speaks to looking at our existing commercial zones and providing maybe some incentive to improve those, whether it's through mixed use zoning or other ways to help are working with Weber State, finding ways and more commercial opportunities along that Harrison Boulevard corridor for more commercial activity to take place.
Is signing part of this two component of commercial along Harrison?
Yeah, so it's not looking at necessarily expanding it, but just maybe trying to find ways to incentivize some redevelopment where we have areas that are possibly underdeveloped along Harrison Boulevard.
Okay.
One other thing, Chair.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, this is not talking about the specifics of the ADU. It's still still discussed broadly in the plan. Is that right?
Yes, this is just establishing. So that, as I mentioned before, the general or the community plan is a guiding document. So this would just establish a structure for the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which will come after to take place. So in the next steps, we'll work with the housing committee meeting and anybody else that wants to be involved in that process, and we'll work with the community as we look at implementing a specific ordinance that will specifically address accessory dwelling units.
That will go through the planning commission before it gets to us again?
Yes, that will go through, like I said, a steering committee meeting, probably I imagine a couple, and then a planning commission, and then come back to the city council for approval.
You've said it over and over again, but I think it is worth emphasizing to the community that it looks like we got about 60 people on the attendee list, that a community plan is just a guiding document. It isn't ordinance. There's nothing there that is enforceable until it becomes an ordinance. It's just, that's all it is. I just want to make sure people, that's a common misunderstanding, is that once this planning document gets passed, that all those things are in stone, and they just aren't. So just don't want to get expectations so high that it's disappointing to people.
And if I could maybe add to that, I appreciate that statement for sure. And, who's to say that community plans, I showed the list of amendments that took place to this community plan specifically. And so, we're not saying this is, like I said, this isn't a crystal ball. We're not saying this is how things have to happen. This is just what the community so far has decided. And so things can always change. The accessory dwelling unit ordinance, for example, right now in the single family areas of the East Central community plan, they're not permitted at all in the single family areas. But as we look at going through the East Central community plan amendment, and in the next 6 to 8 months, that will be something that we're discussing. So that was put in place in 2009, and possibly down the road that'll change. And so I think all of these things can change over time, or as situations change, and that's how the plan is meant to work.
One thing I do it has been a concern, is that sometimes we don't consult the planning document when things happen. For instance, like the folks in the Horace Mann community were pretty upset that that development that just got approved there kind of flies in the face of their community plan. So I guess I'm asking that if there's some way to connect the community plan with things that it speaks to when they come up, that would be really nice if we could find a way to make that happen. Maybe better. I know it does happen. I just wish it was better. Sorry.
Sure. And that's something that we look at as well whenever and that's something that we did look at with that community plan, but there was some I guess some things that could be taken either way. And so as we work through it as a staff and our understanding, with that Horace Mann, I'm not going to get into the weeds of that one too much, but
No, let's not go there.
yeah. Well, with this community plan, I mean, that's the idea. Like I said, it's a guiding document. So when we have projects that come up, proposals from different people that want to do.
I just have one question. So my internet must be going in and out a little bit. I missed the last part. I apologize.
Oh, you're fine. What were you going to ask?
I was just going to ask, I guess I just can't remember, and I apologize. How many rental homes or units can there be within these same, in the whole Southeast? I mean, is there a regulation on how many rental properties there can be in those areas?
In terms of rental properties, there's not, and that's I think that's protected by the the federal government, the Housing Act. We can't regulate if somebody can or cannot rent their single family home out. If you're speaking specifically to accessory dwelling units, that is something that we'll, as I mentioned, we'll get into with the amendment that will take place after the community plan is implemented. And then right now we only have on the books, we have 3 that are approved and 2 that are being reviewed.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to say how much I appreciate all those people that were involved in the process and the lengths that we went to get the community involvement, because we are always asking that, right? Like how many people are involved and et cetera. I guess for me, I just have kind of philosophical conundrum here, because I'm just not seeing the point of limiting these ADUs. I just don't get it. And I think I've said this before, I don't get it. I don't get the difference between that and renting out a whole house, and how we can't really regulate that either. So for me, it's just, I'm missing the point. And I appreciate so much that the community delved into it. But I just don't see the difference. And
so I appreciate that comment. And I think that there's some folks on from the housing committee that can speak to that a little bit as well. Just in terms of why it kind of washed out the way it did is when the Southeast, there was a petition, as I mentioned, for ADU amendment in the Southeast Ogden area to entirely do away with it. So when it came before the council, the direction was, hey, work this out in a community plan process. And as I mentioned, being part of the housing committee, the steering committee, it was a spirited conversation every time. And there were folks, like I said, we had pretty good representation from, both from folks that wanted accessory dwelling units versus people that didn't. And, I think that there was certainly a level of education and understanding of what an accessory dwelling unit actually was for everybody involved. And anyways, I think that the plan reflects the compromise that they worked through as directed by the city council.
Any other comments or questions before we go to public comment?
Yeah, Chair, if I just have, I guess, more of a clarification. I'm not understanding what Councilmember Heyer said, because my understanding of a community plan is that we have to look at that first. From the Planning Commission standpoint, don't they have to decide whether it fits into the community plan or not first before we go even onto the general plan? I'm not understanding what Councilmember Heyer's comment was.
Speaking from the planning staff, whenever we have a rezone or something of that nature that we look at, or a large development, something that's going to really have an impact, we do that. You're right. You're exactly right. That's our first resource, is to look at, is this supported in the community plan? Is this supported in the general plan? There's several master plans that the city has adopted that we look at as well. I think, for example, the river redevelopment area. So those are the first steps that we take as a planning staff to make sure that what is being proposed is in character and in compliance with these plans that we put in place. There was there's probably some disagreement on the Horace Mann plan and whether or not the proposal that that was approved this would be at 1770 Canyon, whether or not that really fell into the community plan. But as we worked through it as a planning staff and talked together, our understanding was that was what the plan supported. So, again, not to get into the weeds of the Horace Mann situation, but just to clarify your question, yes, we do look at the community and the general plan when we look at and consider zoning amendments or things that are going to have a large impact.
So the second part of that question then is that I'm sorry, I haven't read the plan for a while either. I can't remember. Did we say that we were going to set thresholds of ADUs within the community plan right now?
No, those thresholds wouldn't be decided on until, so the community plan it basically provides the back or the building structure, right? And then it just says this is how it can be done. And then in the next step, the zoning text amendment is when we get into, where those bricks are going to be, how everything else lays out. And so we'll get into the specifics in that next step.
So there are no defined thresholds. You've just kind of looked at the different areas, if you will, of looking at, I can't remember, forest green area versus some different area, the different areas. Is that right?
Right.
And you're going to look at those differently for those ordinances or to develop those ordinances.
Right. Exactly. Each area, potentially could have a different threshold of accessory dwelling units.
So just for clarity, the community plan says we can set those thresholds. It doesn't say we shall set those thresholds. You understand the difference between can and shall?
Well, that's what it guides you to do, right? Is to set thresholds. That would be the guidance from the community plan. So it's not necessarily shall, correct? But that's what the plan would support.
Okay, so it's not a shall be a threshold, but it's you. Okay, I think I understand you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess my point is I get what everybody's saying, but it would be a little disingenuous to have it part of the plan, but then later not intend to follow through with it, right? I'm not saying you're saying we shouldn't follow through with it. I kind of feel like that's the gist of the conversation is like, oh, we're not really putting this in right now, so it's not something we actually have to consider. But I guess I disagree.
I'm with you, Chair. I don't know what would compel us to limit ADUs. So that I'm concerned about the wording too. I don't know. We want to set an expectation if we don't have one. Is that what you're saying too?
Yeah, I think, and like I said, I'm not trying to discredit all the work that was done. It's just, I guess I haven't heard an argument for me that explains why this particular piece is here. Everything that I'm kind of understanding about it actually confirms that the ADU is not the problem. It's rentals and it's several other things, parking, etc., that are things that are very hard to enforce. And I really don't know if this would be enforceable. Like, it just seems like we're just setting ourselves up for more frustration because I don't think this is going to solve the problem that the community is talking about.
Nor do I, which is kind of my whole motivation.
Yeah. Any other questions before we get public comment? Great. Okay. So for this public input piece for the community plan, just trying to go back to where I am. For the South Ogden Community Plan, the public input portion of our meeting right now will only be about this particular item. We will have general public comment after one additional item on the agenda. So that's just one thing to make clear, that this would be a time for folks to give comment just about the South Ogden Community Plan. And also, I just want to mention, because we have just reinstated our public input and public comment period, that we really are going to need participants to state their name for the record. I know sometimes you have a name posted in the comments, but if you could just state your name also for the record. Some of the names are not full names, some of them are only numbers, so that would be really helpful to state your full name before you start talking. And you do have 3 minutes to comment. Another thing I just want to mention is that we certainly want to hear everybody's thoughts and ideas, but we do have rules of civility at the council. We really want to hear your ideas and thoughts, but we expect them to be presented in a civil manner. Everyone is expected to be dignified, respectful, and courteous. The council will not tolerate personal attacks, disrespectful comments, insults, name-calling, etc. Please refrain from words or comments that are disruptive. Clapping is only acceptable when invited by the chair in support of a special recognition. And shouting and booing during the meetings are not permitted, which I don't think you'll be able to do. But just to clarify what our civility standards are, that's what it is. So I think Brandon will explain to you how to participate.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, those who are joining us via Zoom will be able to participate, whether through the app or by telephone. And you can get in the queue here, as we already have 6 people with their hands raised. You get in the queue by raising your hand. And if you're using the application, there should be an option to do so at the bottom of your screen, whether you're on mobile or on a computer. If you're joining us via telephone, to raise your hand, you would need to dial *9 on your keypad. So with that, Chair Burqa, are you okay to proceed?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so first, we will hear from Jeff and Andrea Smith. If you would please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Andrea Kessler Smith, and my husband is here with me as well. He is Jeff Smith. First of all, I wanted to say to Mr. Spencer, thank you for putting together such a great presentation. As an Ogden resident, I've lived here for 10 years, and I am just so excited for a lot of these plans that are hopefully going to be in motion soon. I have 2 questions. My first question, there was one of the slides regarding Grandview Park. And next to that, Grandview Park is the now demolished Grandview Elementary. One of the sentences or bullets that you had in one of your slides, it said, I just had a question. What is the open space with the new development south of Grandview Park that is making that connection? So that's my first question. I'm curious what you meant by a new development there. I am terrified that Grandview Elementary area is going to go to the hands of a developer that's going to put in some dense housing, and that is already right next to 2 areas, 2 different condo areas, as well as apartments that are just 3 streets up from there, closer to Harrison, plus a ton of illegal accessory dwelling units. So I'm just terrified that that's going to become something like a dense housing area. So I wanted some clarification on what that new development south of Grandview Park is. And then my second question is, when you were talking about pedestrian walkways, I wondered about potentially adding a sidewalk to the south side of Country Hills, which would be the north side of McKay-D, between where the Ice Center is and almost up to where like the Smiths is on Harrison. So I wondered if we could maybe see about adding a sidewalk there on that McKay-D north side property.
Is that all you have? We'd love you to use up your whole 3 minutes if you'd like, and then we can see if we can get some answers to your questions.
No, other than I love Ogden and I want to keep making it great. So in regards to Grandview Elementary, I have been in touch with Zane Walston-Kuhn, I think that's how you pronounce his name, with Ogden City or Ogden School District to potentially be a part of their master planning committee to help with, these properties that they are holding on to for right now. He said that they have a freeze on selling their properties right now. But I just really want to keep making Ogden awesome, which is why I'm here tonight, because I'm very invested in Ogden and I love it here. So that's all I have to say with my last minute is I love Ogden, and whatever I can do to help make it great, I want to do it.
Well, thank you. We love having community members engaged like you are. Thank you. Clint, I don't know if you'd like to respond to any of those questions here, or follow up later.
However you would like me to do.
Yeah, they're pretty specific, so it's totally up to you.
So I can address a couple of those real quick. The Grandview Park, so where the Grandview Elementary is what there. I think that we would expect that to develop. I'm not exactly sure what kind of development would take place. That being said, the plan also supports, as I mentioned, in making sure that whatever kinds of multifamily, if that was the case, went in there, making sure that would not have a negative impact on the single family homes in the area. We're working on some ordinances right now that would improve multifamily development, how it looks and feels. And then the plan specifically addresses looking at buffer areas and other types of other ways to make those connections work and not impact single family neighborhoods. Your other question, and first off, I appreciate your desire to make Ogden better. And I just want to say this for the entire community. It's been as a planner, you want to get people's input. You want to get their feedback. And, over the past 18 years that I've been a planner, I don't know that I've come across a community that is involved and entrenched in their community as Southeast Ogden thus far. So we really appreciate that. Pedestrian walkways. I think that we could, if it's not specifically outlined in the plan now, I think that we could probably, look at adding that sidewalk connection on the south side of Country Hills that you were talking about.
Thanks, Clint.
Diane Krantz, your time is now. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
All right, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Diane.
All right. I've been walking to Weber State. Well, I walked to Weber State for something like 17 to 20 years. And I much appreciate the idea of more sidewalks going in. But one of the major problems that occurs with adding sidewalks is that they're not maintained during the winter oftentimes by the merchants on whose property they run, or by the city. In fact, sometimes there's a problem because the city plows actually throw snow that's been taken off the sidewalks back onto the sidewalks. So I'd at least like the city to keep in mind that providing walkable areas is a wonderful thing, but they do have to be maintained. My second observation is, having lived behind Smith's for many years and watched commercial endeavors go in and out of there, if you're thinking of increasing commercial properties in terms of Weber State students, I think many small businesses open believing they're going to get a lot of business from Weber State students. And over the years, I have not seen that happen, and I've seen any number of commercial interests come and go maybe within a 3-year period or even less. And so I'm wondering if any type of survey would be done of Weber State students or getting input from them, not necessarily from the university itself, but getting
input from the students themselves on what types of businesses they might support. So that's it for what I have to observe and ask a question about. The question, I guess, is will you think about doing some sort of a survey of that type?
Yeah, thank you, Diane.
Next, we will hear from Evelyn, if you wouldn't mind stating your name for the record and limiting your comments to 3 minutes.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have just a few questions. And
do you mind stating your
I'm
name?
sorry, my name's Evelyn Christensen.
Thank you.
All right, I need a little more clarification on the ADUs. I'm trying to understand that because when I purchased my home, it had a rental unit in the basement. So are we talking about adding more, or is there a grandfather clause? I purchased this home in, I think it was between 85 and 88. So that's my first question. My second question is, I had read somewhere, or maybe it's somebody's thought process, that in that Gramercy property, they were actually going to use that for student housing. And, some of the comment that I've read is that, there's not enough of student housing, but I read in the Ogden Standard Examiner recently that they're putting a hotel on Harrison Boulevard on the property just below the ice rink. And I'm wondering why we're bringing in a hotel with all this traffic and then moving student housing down to Gramercy. So that's my question. I'd like a little more information on, I joined the call a little bit late for the meeting, the connection to Eccles Avenue. It was mentioned briefly, so if you could expand on that. And then my last thing is a comment. Since the new surgical center has gone up here off of Eccles Avenue, there's commercial trucks that are coming through this neighborhood all the time. And it seems to me that they should be using Harrison Boulevard rather than coming through a residential neighborhood when there's so many children in the area. So those are my 3 comments. I do appreciate the opportunity to give input. I too am an Ogdenite. I walked down Country Hills Drive when I was in high school, when I was 16, and walked through the snow when there were no sidewalks at all. So anyway, I appreciate the input. I love living in Ogden. So that's the end of my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evelyn. And that was a lot of questions. So I'm wondering if part of them maybe we'll follow up a little bit more later. The only question I think maybe we could address right now is the ADUs. I guess my understanding, right, Clint, is that if you buy a house and it has an ADU in it, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's been authorized by the city. It could have been like a rental that's not authorized, or it could even be like a mother-in-law apartment with a mother-in-law in it, right?
Right. In order to legally utilize that space, so if you built a home or bought a home that has what we call a mother-in-law apartment in it, to legally utilize that space, it would have to go through an accessory dwelling unit application process, and then get an actual license and a permit to do that. So in the plan, it's not talking about. You don't necessarily ever have grandfather rights to a accessory dwelling unit. As ordinance change or as ownership changes, you would have to go back in and get that accessory dwelling unit reapproved, and potentially maybe zoning ordinances have changed, and so as you reapprove, your unit may or may not be within those requirements. But the ordinance isn't looking at doing away with the ones that exist as so much as when folks actually come in and get them licensed, the community has expressed a desire to establish a threshold of how much they feel like their community could absorb before it was compromised in terms of a single family nature.
Great, thank you. And should we just have Evelyn maybe contact you about some of those other specific questions that are really specific to her area?
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you.
Any comments that anybody has, they can send to planning@ogdencity.com.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you here. It's just I don't know if we can get into every little specific detail in this conversation, but we certainly want to hear your thoughts and ideas. You ready? There you go, Brandon. I see you coming up.
Sorry about that. For those who wanted that email address, I threw it in the chat there for you. So now we will hear from the user whose screen name is Steve L87. Your time is now, so please state your name for the record and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Stephen LaRue, and I've lived on Old Post Road almost my whole life. I think I've got 4 questions or thoughts. The first one being, I believe that I heard the planner say that there will be access to and from the new apartments where IHC Behavioral used to be from Old Post Road. The problem was that when it was behavioral health, they had to put a gate up because people who were not accessing the hospital were just using it to get from Old Post Road to Harrison. Second question is, between the south end of Weber Basin and 5025 South, basically the length of the bike path that you installed out here several years ago, there were 4 single-family residences, 2 of them on fairly large lots. We'd like to discuss maintaining the current zoning for those 4 lots, hopefully, and maintain them as single-family residences. Third, is speeding on Old Post Road between Shadow Valley Drive and 4600 South. They did zebra stripe a crossing and put up a school crossing sign. That's not helping at all. And this may be outside your purview, but when the bicycle path was installed, they put in overheads from the driveway to the street. And as far as I know, no one has been to clean underneath the overheads. So mine is clogged with mud and leaves, and the water just spills out and crosses the street into Christopher Village. Thanks. That's it for me.
Thank you, Steve.
Next, we'll hear from Barb Trask. If you wouldn't mind stating your name for the record and limiting your comments to 3 minutes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Barb.
Okay, hi. I just have a few quick comments and then one brief question that might be a little too specific to answer right here. But first of all,
do you mind stating your name? I know we already said it.
Sure. I'm Barb Trask, and I'm speaking for myself and my husband, Tim. We live on Ridgedale Drive. I want to thank you for an excellent presentation, and in general, I think you've taken the consideration of a number of people to produce what I believe is a great plan for Ogden. I want to applaud specifically the multifamily unit increase, because as a professor at Weber State, I think it supports our students to provide housing opportunities for them close to campus. And I also think that it will potentially enhance the diversity in our area. I also applaud the idea of a pedestrian bridge across Harrison Boulevard, but I would, and so pedestrians on Harrison are a concern, but as a cyclist, I think we really need to have some bike lanes on Harrison as well. And then finally, my question concerns, because I live on Ridgedale Drive, you mentioned toward the end a potential connection between Ridgedale and Bonneville Terrace, which on some level would be great because it would be easy to get around. On another level, living on what is currently a dead-end road, has its benefits. So I'm wondering if you have any information about a potential timeline for that connection. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks so much. Great comments. Only one question there. Do you want to get back to her later or respond now, Clint?
Okay. So on the timeline for the Ridgedale connection, I can't really give you a timeline. That would probably, that's not something that the city would step in and do. That would occur as private development occurs, but the plan would just support that happening. So, as long as there's no development there, then it'll stay the way it is. But in the future, if somebody wants to come in and make that connection, the plan would support it.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving on. Next, we have Lucia Madrigal. Please state your name for the record and limit your time to 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi.
Took me a while. So, hi, my name is Lucia Madrigal. I live in Ogden at the East Bench area. I own my own home. I have a master's degree in economics and social policy. And I would like to make my comment about the ADUs. So I would like to say that I oppose this initiative to limit ADUs. Southeast Ogden community is significantly richer than other areas in Ogden. We just need to see the prices of the house on sale right now on the east of the Harrison Boulevard are 2 or 3 times higher than the other side of Harrison Boulevard. So I just have a problem understanding what exactly you mean when you said that ADUs are, and I quote, an intrusion of multifamily into single-family neighborhoods by location on arterial streets, meaning Harrison Boulevard. I believe this kind of a statement is just attempts to segregate people. It's just I have not heard a good reason or argument about why ADUs are bad for a community. Sounds to me that rich and white people, one poor people, or people of color are living among them. The world is experiencing many changes now. We need to learn about what is going on around us, and we need to stop racism, segregation. I think limiting these ADUs and makes us, our community, our city go backwards. Me and my family, we want to live in an inclusive and friendly place where international people, LGBTQ+, and people of color live without fear. And I think sending that message will create some disruption in the message that we want to say as a community. Thank you much for listening.
Thank you.
Okay, now we will hear from Jerry Jones. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple of things.
Do you mind stating your name, Jerry?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Jerry Jones. Currently, I'm living in South Ogden. I've been out of state for several years, and I had two items to talk about. First one, I walk my dog along Glassman in the morning. Right now I'm in South Ogden along Birch Creek area. And people think it's a speedway up to the four-way stop there on Edgewood, and then it goes into Ogden City property. So I'd like to see some traffic control if this opens up to 4200 South. The other part is I've owned a fully developed lot on Ridgedale Drive for over 21 years, and I'm currently designing a home to go in there to be built in the next several months. I want to make sure that there was no blanket changes to the zoning up there. Currently it was zoned R2, and I want to be assured that there's no change to that. And that's all I had for comment.
Thank you, Jerry. I wonder, I don't know if you'd be able to comment about that, Clint, but maybe he could follow up with you later about that zoning issue.
Sure, I mean, the zoning issue, the plan is not recommending any zoning changes in Ridgedale. So whatever zoning is there should remain the same.
Good news for him.
Yay.
All right, moving on, we will hear from Jenny. If you would state your full name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Jenny Nagy. I live in Ogden, just north of Weber State. My husband and I own our home. I am asking the council to support accessory dwelling units in all Ogden neighborhoods, and as part of this, to oppose the new restrictions on ADUs proposed in the Southeast Ogden Community Plan. As we've discussed, ADUs provide many benefits. They are an important source of affordable housing in high opportunity areas. They provide supplemental income to homeowners. Affordable housing and supplemental income are both especially important during economic downturns like we're experiencing. ADUs avoid issues typically associated with absentee landlords because the owner lives in the property. And furthermore, I think the benefits of ADUs are strongest when the entire city participates, because citywide participation allows for transparency, exercise of individual property rights, and simplification of enforcement. Additionally, in the current context of George Floyd and our collective responsibility to actively combat systemic racism, I feel like I want to say that single-family zoning, especially the larger lot single-family zoning that you find almost exclusively in the southeastern area of Ogden, and that's the Southeast Ogden Community Plan, as well as the area where I live just north of Weber State, that larger lot single-family zoning shares a bit of an uncomfortable relationship with historical patterns of redlining. Ogden did have a redlining map. You can download it publicly online. I shared it with some of the council members. It provides a visual that Ogden has historically systematically excluded people from color from its southeast corner. There's pretty robust evidence that allowing for more diverse housing options in neighborhoods is an effective way to increase neighborhood integration in terms of on racial and economic lines. So I think the need to increase housing options and reduce barriers to residing in Southeast Ogden is imperative in the effort to dismantle systemic racism. So I'm asking the council to stand in support of ADUs as you make decisions regarding the proposed Southeast Ogden Community Plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen Bodine, it is your time. It is your, excuse me, it is your turn. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
It can also be her time.
All right, can you hear me yet?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jen Bodine, and I want to thank you so much for your hard work on the Southeast Ogden Community Plan. And I do want to thank you as well for ensuring that the public have an opportunity to comment on the plan. I am a resident of the southern portion of the southeast area, and I want to comment similar to what Jenny Nagy stated, to express my support for the allowance of accessory residential units in my neighborhood. Like Jenny stated, I think ADUs provide much of the needed affordable housing in these higher opportunity areas. They're also a great way to add units to existing neighborhoods while still maintaining the character of that neighborhood. And then having the requirement for one unit to be owner occupied, it always ensures that those properties are cared for. So I have no concern at all about permitting them completely across the neighborhood. As you all know, housing prices are starting to already get pretty out of hand and out of control and out of reach for our citizens. So to meet the growing population and demand, all neighborhoods in Ogden are going to need to be willing to add new housing units of different types to ensure that prices stay affordable and attainable for folks. And then I would also like to echo the comments made previously that, you know, mixed income, diverse neighborhoods are better neighborhoods. They're stronger and more vibrant, nicer neighborhoods to be a part of. So that's another reason to do it, in addition to the economic reasons. So I'm not in favor of having any thresholds for ADUs. I think it would also be difficult from a private property standpoint. I don't know how you would allow some property owners to have them and some not. How do you make that decision? It doesn't seem terribly fair either in that regard. So thank you very much for your time and consideration of my comments.
Thank you.
So the next person in the queue does not have a name attached to their account. They are appearing as dash, 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 dash. So with that said, please state your name for the record and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, state your name for the record, please.
Hi, Angela. This is Heath Sato. I'm a resident of East Bench, and I just wanted to talk about the ADUs. Also, I'm a little bit disturbed to see a limit being considered. I want to point out that decisions made about housing affect more than just the immediate neighborhood. They affect the housing situation for our entire city. I have to ask why this particular neighborhood might be getting special, not in my backyard consideration over the rest of Ogden, and would ask everyone involved to be completely transparent about that. So I wanted to talk about ADUs just for a moment. That ADUs are a way for families who rent them to enjoy a neighborhood and its amenities while they build careers and personal wealth. The days of purchasing a home here for $150,000 are gone, and the prices are continuing to rise. The cost to construct a freestanding ADU is $70,000 to $110,000, providing a quality home within an existing neighborhood. They provide a place for parents or children to rent in close proximity to their family. They provide an income stream for families to pay for things like college or supplement retirement, where seniors can age in place while taxes continue to rise and a fixed income doesn't. As mentioned before, the concerns about ADUs are unfounded, as the property owner is required to live on premise with the renter. You're not going to make it to the end of your lease if you're within the sightline and earshot of your landlord, and if you're behaving badly. ADUs provide soft density rather than using large apartment buildings plopped into a neighborhood. Since those ADUs are required to be located behind the existing home, it means they have no effect on how the neighborhood feels, since the ADUs are not even viewable from the street. We have an affordable housing problem, and I don't mean just for lower incomes. We're struggling with the missing middle, housing for those that make our average median income of $46,000. I encourage you to not limit ADUs in any area of Ogden, and make a decision to help mitigate our affordable housing problems rather than adding to these problems. I don't think it's fair for one neighborhood to place our housing pressures unevenly on all the other neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up is Harvey Day. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Harvey Day. I am a lifelong Ogden resident. And first of all, Clint, thank you so much for your very thorough presentation. I really appreciated the clarification. I had some questions and they were already answered. So just to echo the sentiments of Lucia, Jenny, Jen, and Keith, I think ADUs are extremely important in providing affordable housing for anyone who lives in Ogden and people who want to stay in Ogden. I currently am at risk of being priced out of my apartment, so I really, really want to see at least some small changes being made to ensure that people who are longtime Ogden residents and help build the city can continue to stay in Ogden. No further questions or comments. Thank you all so much. I really appreciated all of the comments and all of the work that's being done. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person is in line is listed in our queue as EBPC. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I think they have to figure out how to unmute themselves. Aha.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can. Please state your name for the record.
This is Elwin Bodley. I live in Shadow Valley, and I've attended some of these steering committees with Clint Stevens, and since 2019, nothing's changed as far as ADUs in our neighborhood, except we have a couple of situations where we have them. But first of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Stevens, are you paid by Ogden City, which I already know the answer to that, or Weber State University? Because everything I hear is you're trying to accommodate Weber State University's wants, needs, and there's a lot more in Ogden going on besides Weber State University. My understanding is you still live in Eagle Mountain, and you really don't, in our meetings, don't even know the neighborhoods in Ogden. We talked about that. We have two situations in our neighborhood where we do have adult children living in the homes, and one of which, there are three, and night after night, it's like living next to a frat house. Cars line up in front of the houses. These situations, there's never enough parking. The parking police say that they can't control it because there's not enough manpower. By Mr. Stevens' own admission, is there's not enough manpower to police these ADUs and make sure that they're enforced and used as recommended. 36th Street is a classic example of that. They start out single family homes, and now there are 6, 8, 10 kids living in virtually every home along the north side of Weber State University. There are some neighborhoods that, our taxes are probably the highest in all of Ogden City. And this is not the place to be having, parking on both sides of the streets night after night, bumper to bumper. And we've addressed this, but nothing's changed. And it appears it's just going to continue. And there is no enforcement by Mr. Stevens' own admissions in the meetings. And so that's my complaints. And I know most of my neighbors up here, the vast majority that can afford the homes and built the homes and lived here for quite a while, feel the same as I do. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thanks so much for calling. And I guess I just want to clarify, I think you're talking about Clint Spencer, the planner, and he does work for Ogden City, and he was asked to go out and do these town halls and find out what the community wanted. And I trust him in that effort. So we want to be careful not to personalize these issues necessarily against the planner. But also, to me, it sounds like you're talking about rental property, not necessarily ADUs. So yeah, there's not much we can do about rental properties, right?
Would you like me to address that? Sure.
Yeah, if you'd like to, but that's what it kind of sounds like to me, right?
Yeah, I think Mr. Bodley's correct. There are several rental issues, and that has been something that's been discussed throughout the community plan process. And the enforcement is difficult. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's for how many folks we have on code services, I think we have 4 staff people that are, and we experience some significant change over there. So, sometimes we're not even fully staffed in that division. But as I mentioned, part of the effort in making a neighborhood is not necessarily putting everything on the city, but working together as a community. We want to make the community involved and help them understand what's taking place there, which is why we're putting together some of these websites to help them identify where legal rentals might be, where legal vacation rentals are, where legal accessory dwelling units take place, and then provide them an opportunity to report where they feel like illegal opportunities or illegal situations are taking place. And once they call and make a complaint, then a code enforcement effort is instigated and it's followed through. So.
Thank you.
And I do live in Eagle Mountain. I would love to locate closer. So if anybody has a home that's for sale, let me know.
Thank you.
Next up is Blaine Richey. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
My name is Blaine Richey. First of all, I am in favor of limiting ADUs. If nothing else, for traffic. This idea of increasing the population density is not good for traffic. Where I live on Country Hills Drive, we're slammed already. And whether it's rentals or ADUs, it just increases traffic and danger to children that live in the area. When I moved to where I live now, 31 years ago, it wasn't near as busy, and that was one of the advantages of living here. And obviously, there is going to be growth, but hopefully, it is growth that is not doesn't go unchecked. Is what I would say. People that work hard to get where they are, and they want to live in an area that has certain characteristics, and single-family homes is what this was, and would hopefully stay that way. Then I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask Clint. You mentioned connecting 4600 to Country Hills. My question there is, what kind of connection are you talking about? And also Country Hills to Valley Drive, Weber State. Like I mentioned before, Country Hills is just slammed with traffic, and whatever we could do to mitigate the traffic is beneficial. Speeding is an issue, as it sounds like, on Old Post and 4600. And I know some places get the traffic monitors. You mentioned those, and I think that would be beneficial here. So I'd like those questions answered. And then the last question I have is on the hotel that's going to be built on Harrison. What kind of access they're going to have? Are they going to be accessing through the event center? If that's the case, that is not good, because again, you're trying to put more traffic onto Country Hills, and it's got too much already. So those are my comments.
Thanks, Blaine.
Chair, did you want to continue?
Oh, sure. I just thought those are pretty specific. Maybe we could follow up with Clint later. I don't want him to have to get into specifics necessarily.
Sure. No problem. So with that, we will move on to the next person on the list, which is listed in our queue as AR. It is your turn. Please state your name for the record and limit your time to 3 minutes. Okay, we're having an issue because this person is using an older version of Zoom, and in order to allow them to speak, they need to be promoted to a panelist. Chair Burqa, if you're all right with that, I can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, let's give it a shot. We're living on the wild side.
I am sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please state your name for the record.
My name is Ashley Remkes. I've lived in the north part of Ogden, the central Ogden, and now I'm on the east bench of Ogden. And I want to say thank you for encouraging community voice. I, too, am of the mind that a community will be stronger by being inclusive and supporting the needs of all citizens. One aspect of the plan here obviously addresses trail use in Ogden, and that's one of the greatest assets of Ogden. I really appreciate that all citizens have access to trails. It's really important. Particularly, this presentation addressed the trail use on Buse Drive. I want to point out that this has been a highly problematic issue currently. It is unclear to residents of the area whether or not this is a trailhead. As you mentioned, Mr. Spencer, the signage at the gate is unclear. The area is a residential area, though, and it attracts a great deal of traffic. Some of the traffic is from trail users who want to hike or bike, and some of the traffic is from people who visit the area to smoke and drink, and sometimes, at least in the summer, set off fireworks. The fear of fire is a deep one for residents in this area. The mountain, as you can imagine, is really dry in July. The traffic on the street is so heavy that we're worried about first responders being able to address a fire if one were to happen. I just mean to express then that the importance of any future plan to recognize Buse Drive as a residential area, and it's really not made for high volumes of traffic. So a parking lot, to take that into consideration, would so that maybe the existing trailheads wouldn't be overburdened since they are kind of nestled into residential areas. Maybe Quail Run Drive might be a better fit for a trailhead because it's not yet developed. It might be more feasible to expand the trailhead at Buse Canyon or to the north. I just want to consider or urge you to consider the development of trailheads as this community plan goes forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up is Monica Williams. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Monica Williams, and I also live in Southeast Ogden in Shadow Valley. I am also going to comment in support of ADUs, and I'm very opposed to limiting them. A lot of what I was going to say has already been said, the problem of being down in the queue. But I especially appreciated, and Lucia Madrigal made many of the same comments I was going to make about ADUs and diversity and segregation. And she mentioned the language on intrusion of multifamily homes into the single family home neighborhoods. And as a Southeast Ogden resident, that language really bothers me to have in my community plan. I'm really concerned about what the community plan implies about our community, especially when it comes to ADUs. The community, just from the surveys I saw and from participating in some of the planning process, the plan related to ADUs really does not represent everyone's position on these issues. Like I said, support ADUs, and I think our diversity of our neighborhood is a plus, and I would like to see much more diversity. I would encourage the council members to consider how affordable housing especially I live in Shadow Valley, in our neighborhood allows people access to schools and also social resources of the neighborhood that they might not have in other neighborhoods that had more affordable housing. It seems like people are not understanding, even though Clint spent a lot of time on it, that ADUs are different than rentals. Owners live on the property. And a lot of the discussion I hear from opponents, it has an underlying assumption that those people will move into our neighborhood and they're somehow different from us. We don't want them here. That does not represent what I think our community needs to be. And I know other people as well. While the people who live in ADUs may not own the property, they do have a vested interest in the property in the neighborhood because they live there. Their landlords live there. They want to stay there. So I really encourage the council to consider what assumptions are being made about the types of people who would move into ADUs and the motivations that people who live here might have to try to keep, quote unquote, those people out, and that it doesn't represent the whole community.
Thank you for your comments.
Next in the queue is Brad Mortensen. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I think it might be Dr. Mortensen.
Good evening, Chair Burqa and council members. Brad Mortensen. Brad is just fine, thanks. But I really appreciate the opportunity to comment on the plan. Appreciate the work of the planning committee to allow Weber State to be involved in the process, being able to host some of those conversations on campus, I think facilitated not only the planning process, but also some conversations with our neighbors at the university, which is important. And I appreciate how the plan is trying to balance the needs of the university as a site where I think I saw the numbers once, except for maybe close with BDO, kind of the highest single destination that people travel to on a daily basis, and balance our needs as we grow and try to serve the community with the needs of our neighbors, and to try to facilitate that in a way that works well for everyone. We've had conversations for a number of years now related to student housing options around campus, and having the plan include the possibility of a student housing overlay being adopted and looked at in a way that can more strategically promote student housing close to campus. I mean, that is a game changer for all of these other issues. When we talk about the impact of students being more in the single family communities, when we talk about the impact on traffic, air quality is another one. As we have so many commuters, if we can improve housing options close to campus, I think that's really important and will have positive impacts for the university and for the community as a whole. Along that line, with the BRT route coming as well, I think it's an exciting time to update the plan for Southeast Ogden. And I did have a bit of hesitation as Mr. Spencer shared the plan, because it felt like there was a lot of work in there for Weber State to take on as well. But we look forward to continuing to do that and working closely with the administration, with the council, and our neighbors. Finally, I just think the whole conversation around housing is really important, not just for students, but for our faculty and staff as well. Housing affordability is a concern there as we see the prices increase so dramatically. And I think more flexibility with housing options is something that can serve the entire Weber State community and hopefully the South Ogden community in a beneficial way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next is Angel Castillo. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Angel Castillo, an Ogden resident and a former Ogden City Planning Commissioner, and I would like to request that the council table voting on ADUs in the South Community Plan. I'm aware that the community plan doesn't set limitations of ADUs, and that will be dealt with later. However, I do not believe it should be included in the community plan at all. And as a former planning commissioner, I feel it's important you're aware of the November 20th Planning Commission work session on the Southeast Community Plan and review the minutes, as the overall consensus was the Planning Commission was not comfortable with limiting the number of ADUs. We were told by planning staff that there would be an opportunity to revisit limiting ADUs prior to voting on the Southeast Ogden Plan, and that never happened. To let you know what the Planning Commission thoughts were on ADUs, I'll read you a portion of the official minutes of the November 20th Planning Commission work session written by Jeanette Borkland. Quote, while the steering committee recommendation is to limit ADUs in particular areas, Commission is concerned by doing so, property rights are affected. Discussion continued relating to the limitations of these in other communities, including at the time of the ordinance was adopted to allow them citywide. There was language adopted in community plans whereby they were prohibited in particular areas, and the intent at that time had been to consider amending those plans to remove the restriction. Commission felt ADUs provide a benefit to both the community and the individual property owner. It was noted that there is a gap in housing costs and wages, and ADUs provide more options for middle-income property owners. Another concern is the lack of education and licensing regarding ADUs, as well as proper enforcement of non-ADU illegal rentals. Commission felt the option of ADUs is consistent with the intent of the plan as it promotes home ownership. They also felt since the owner is living on the property for an ADU, they're self-enforced, while illegal rentals depend on reports to code enforcement. Commission felt it important that when a license for ADU is issued, a certificate of notice be placed on the property to ensure it remains a single-family home only. Commission also felt ADUs would be self-limiting to the cost of renovating existing homes to comply with code regulations, and it may be prohibitive for many homeowners, end quote. Your Planning Commission wanted to further explore how to manage community objections regarding ADUs, especially with code enforcement, and we were denied that opportunity. Please table your discussion on the Southeast Ogden Plan, or at the very least the portion considering limiting ADUs, until you have a chance to listen to the recording of the November 20th Planning Commission and hear what was discussed. To paraphrase Planning Commission Chair Rick Southwick, if you don't like ADUs, then don't build one, but don't tell me what to do with my property. I fully agree with Chair Southwick. Limiting ADUs violates property rights and limits our capabilities to provide affordable housing options and allowing citizens to build a pathway to retirement security, college savings, personal wealth with ADUs. Thank you.
Thanks, Angel.
Next, we will hear from Andy Beatles. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
My name is Andy Beatles. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi. How are you?
Good. Thanks. I support ADUs. They are a great way to promote affordable housing and limit landlord responsibilities as they're on site. And I appreciate you having this discussion. And really, that's all I wanted to say. I do support this decision.
Thank you.
Next up is Anna. Please state your full name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello, this is Anna Cash. I live at 1615 Canyon Road, and it's not in South Ogden, and I'm sure some of you are confused by that, but I wanted to make some comments because I care about Ogden as a city and as a community. I'm really invested in it, and some of the things that are talked about in this Planning Commission presentation were really frustrating to me because we, in my area, I live right in between Harrison and the mouth of Ogden Canyon. And we have 3 very large developments happening in our area. And there just wasn't as much community involvement as there will be in the city planning, rezoning, whatever it is, meeting that we're talking about. And I actually am in support of an ADU. On our property, we have a pole barn shop that we are trying to turn into an ADU so that we can, have some income and do possibly some sort of, part-time rental, whatever that looks like. And it is an opportunity for our family to create income, like a side hustle income. For those of you that live in this area, maybe you've been hit by the coronavirus and have had to reassess your priorities with your finances. And I think limiting ADUs in our city is really short-sighted. The other option is to have really large housing developments. And those of you that are in single-family homes in South Ogden and you don't like ADUs, would you like a giant apartment complex that is 158 units, less than a mile from your house? I know that there is heavy traffic on Harrison, and I'm just kind of drawing a lot of parallels with 12th Street. 12th Street is ridiculous. I live right on 12th Street. It's called Canyon Road after Harrison Boulevard. And we get people driving super fast. And I understand that traffic is a concern. We also have the 9th Street trailhead that is really close to us, and they want to connect Maxfield to Canyon Road. So it sounds very similar to the woman who was talking about the Buse Drive. So I hope that the committee members will think about this when they look at the planning development that they want to do in South Ogden, and realize that there are a lot of correlations. And, we want those mountain views too. And it's important to think about all members of the community, not just South Ogden or East Bench, where there's a more affluent community. Thank you.
And I'm not sure if you just want to speak to the process. We talked about it during the meeting, but the community plan and kind of the order of when you do the different community plans or something, just to clarify that a little bit.
Sure. So you're speaking about just how how we decide to tackle a certain community plan. Is that what you're asking?
I guess, I feel like that was part of the question, was why is this community getting this focus right now?
Largely, so it kind of, it's kind of like water being brought to a boil, right? There's been several, it's been 32 years. In that 32 years, significant change in the community. I know that what Anna Cash is experiencing probably is quite significant as well, with the apartment developments that have taken place on 12th Street. But we're talking about an increase of over 3,000 people in the community over those 30 years. A large number of buildings and such. And so a lot of what drove the plan being reassessed primarily is, it's first off, it's its age. There's been a lot of change. Student housing was something that needed to be discussed and tackled. And then accessory dwelling units as well was another issue that came before the council, and that kind of spearheaded the effort to get the Southeast Ogden plan in review.
I think she was referencing the 12th Street overlay. Do you know when that was developed?
Oh, I used to.
No, and then if you don't know it off the top of your head, don't look back. We'll find the answer later.
I think it's been within the past 10 years or so, if I'm not mistaken. But the 12th Street overlay zone was developed from the Horace Mann Plan and the 12th Street Corridor Master Plan. So both of those plans initiated the development standards for the 12th Street overlay.
Thanks. I'm noticing on the hands raised that there might be one person that has already spoken. And so I just want to clarify that although we do love to hear your comments, if you'd like to follow up at the planning email address or give a phone call to the city, we'd be happy to have you connected with planning or reach out to the council if you have comments for us. That would be great too. But we just don't allow a person to speak on the same topic more than one time.
With that said, we'll move to the next person in the queue, who is in our queue as Montana. Please state your full name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I just had a couple of comments and then a couple of questions as well.
I'm sorry. Do you mind stating your full name for the record?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Montana Evans. And I just had a couple of comments about the discussion that we're having on ADUs. And I do appreciate you guys opening up kind of for a public forum type thing so we can share our opinions and be involved in part of the process. But with ADUs, I think it's important to look at them and realize that they're a mutually beneficial source of affordable housing and neighborhood stability. With having like the landlord on site, I think it's a great way to help people get into different housing situations as well as help support themselves. Of course, you know, it's been separated from short-term housing and that kind of thing. It's super important where we have a shortage of available affordable housing, that any issues relating to housing should be viewed through a lens of affordability before anything else. And so kind of thinking about how ADUs affect our community positively or even, you know, negatively, if that would be the case on terms of affordability and availability of housing in Ogden. And then I know that there has been some recent talk about sustainability in Ogden and the recycling program, and that's something that I just want to chime in. We definitely have to create room in a budget for. It might not be easy, but it's definitely important, which I know we all know and can relate to.
Thank you, Montana. I just have to interrupt you there because this is only about this particular item. I know it's frustrating, but we're just taking comments about the Southeast Community Plan right now. We will have public comments in just a little bit if you want to stay with us.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next in the queue is Tom M. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, Tom.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
My name is Tom Marcheski. I live in the Southeast community. I continue to be fascinated and impressed with the process that's been initiated, participating in this current opportunity. In some respects, I lament that during the process of creating the master or the Southeast Plan, that some of these ideas and suggestions and recommendations weren't present and available to be considered when the plan was actually created. As valuable as they might be now, their input perhaps could have been more beneficial earlier in the process when the plan was actually being made. That being said, I am supporting the idea of having some sort of limitations. If you take our current ADU standard and extend it to its possible, although maybe not probable, resolution. Every house in the neighborhood could have an ADU, which basically doubles the size of the neighborhood. And I still, for the life of me, can't understand how a home or a location that's zoned for single families can in fact have two families there. We talk about traffic, we talk about stability. Stability in a neighborhood, in my opinion, is people living there for an extended period of time and establishing relationships. I find it interesting that if you go back into the minutes of the council, planning council and the commission, planning commission and city council, when the ADU unit or ADU ordinance was currently passed, my recollection is that there was no public comment made, even though there was a public opportunity for participation. It passed, but in passing, there were two areas that were that didn't have that policy apply. It didn't apply to them. And so the conversation we're having now about limiting is somewhat at odds with the fact that there's areas now that are exempt from the ordinance in the first place. The whole idea behind limiting is to get together with some of the same people that have voiced their opinions tonight and strike some sort of a balance between maintaining a single family neighborhood and being inclusive and more so, and all of the other things that have been mentioned. I think if Weber State wasn't part of the equation, it might be a slightly different discussion. But when you talk about affordable housing and you talk about housing for students, then this all is impacted. Thank you.
Oh, that startled me. I don't think we've gotten to that beeper yet. Thank you, Tom, so much for making your comments.
So it looks like Tom had his hand raised twice with two different accounts.
I don't know for sure that may be his wife. I know that Cindy was very involved and she might want to comment as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Cindy Markeski. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Welcome.
I would just like to thank Clint Spencer and clarify that Clint did a great deal to be very familiar with the Southeast community. Just to maybe give you a little perspective from the steering committee, we had about a 50-50 representation of those who were for ADUs and those who were against. And we worked really hard to understand each other and to strike a balance. And I think we did that really well. You will recall from the early surveys that those surveys indicated about a 50-50 split as far as people who were in favor of ADUs and those who were against. I think that we're missing the point here. We aren't against ADUs entirely. We are interested in keeping a balance that allows for a neighborhood to remain stable and to not, someone mentioned the word soft density. And I think that's what we're about. We are vulnerable when we're next to Weber State University of having an imbalance where there's too many transient people coming and going, and those who are wanting to raise a family in a stable single-family neighborhood become a little uncomfortable when they don't know their neighbors and the neighbors are changing all of the time. There's too much traffic for their children as they're playing on the sidewalks and riding bikes and so forth. The most robust communities are not homogeneous. They have a variety of housing that some want a single family neighborhood. Some are very happy to be in a higher density area. But I think that we can strike a balance. And I think that if we want to maintain next to our beautiful Weber State campus, beautiful single-family neighborhoods, we need to be careful to not allow them to become overrun with too many ADUs, which creates instability, too much traffic, and as we know, it's been made very clear that the code enforcement is practically impossible. And so over time, you end up having these beautiful single-family neighborhoods become run down and become unstable. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Thank you.
Great. It looks like that's all the public comment I can see right now for this particular item. I'd like to suggest we recess just for 5 minutes before we come back to new business and then final public comments, etc. We've been at this for 2.5 hours now, so let's take a 5-minute recess and then come right back, okay? Everybody for listening to all those comments, and thanks Clint for jumping on the spot and answering a few questions for us. Anybody like to have further discussion about this item? Still processing?
I'm kind of processing. Seems like most of the comments were concerning the ADUs. There was a few that still maintained their position of limiting them in their area. Most of the comments were in support of ADUs citywide, and I that's the position that I continue to have. I have a lot of ADU type uses in my neighborhood. And I have scolded these people and tried to get them to go get licensed and inspected. But they, for whatever reason, and motivation's a mystery to me how it all works, but they are good neighbors. They're not bad neighbors. The rental issue is going to continue to be one until the cows come home. So I don't know how we even address that. I don't know how we even discuss that kind of a thing. So that's kind of where I find myself. With respects to the Southeast Ogden Community Plan, however, what we would be approving tonight has not been in the controversial area other than whether it's how the wording is, whether it's expected to be limited or whether it's not. I think that discussion is months off, according to the calendar and what Mr. Spencer was saying. I think we could proceed with this and move forward. That's my thinking.
Anybody else like to share their thoughts?
Chair, I have a thought. I think this is so important to us that I think we ought to have the full council to be involved in the vote. We're missing 2 council members tonight, and I get the impression that there needs to be more discussions on certain aspects of the plan. I don't see why we're under any time element to look at this, but I think the full council ought to have an opportunity to voice their vote on this plan.
We can give them a homework assignment to listen to all the comments.
We could. That'd be, but I think enforcement is a problem for the ADUs, and I don't know how to rectify that. But I get the impression that there still needs to be some more discussion, especially along those lines of ADU. What do we want to do with that?
Chair Burqa, could I comment?
Please.
I'm kind of in support of what Doug mentioned too. One, for allowing other council members to have an opportunity to give their input on this item, but also I found myself in a point of pause and reflection based on the feedback I heard from the public. I'm feeling kind of strongly that we should have equity in terms of how we address ADUs across the city. And I just don't think that we should make an exception in one area that we don't make in other areas. And so that the burden is spread equally amongst neighborhoods and socioeconomics and so on. But I also am not really sure which side I land on in terms of, I know I want there to be some equity across the city, but I don't know if that means that we should have no limits across the city and do so equally, or if we should have reasonable limits of overuse and do so equally across the city. That's where I'm at. And I could use more time to contemplate that, I guess.
How about you, Councilmember White? I should just ask you since you're the only one that hasn't commented. Any thoughts?
I actually I think that we should delay it and allow the other council members to weigh in. And I also, I think that the comments actually they were actually really great tonight. And I appreciate that. I appreciate, I guess looking at it, I think Weber State is, or in that area is different than across the rest of the city. I think there's definitely some issues, and I guess would like to understand a little bit more how that was contemplated. And sorry, Clint did a great job, but I might actually have to ask questions, how it was contemplated and how they decided how they came to the compromise and everything like that. So I apologize for not being part of that process, but it would be helpful for me to have a better understanding. I think Cindy's comments really resonated with me as far as they did come to a compromise, and it sounds like there's a good reason why they came to a compromise. So I'd just like to know why and how that happened. So, but more so than that, I'd like the other council members to have an opportunity to weigh in on the vote. So.
Yeah, that's definitely the way I kind of lean too. Also, I think that, I really appreciated the comments, and I apologize, I didn't write down everybody's name, but a comment like, I wish that these people would have been a part of the whole process. But I think that that's also part of understanding the process is that actually, in my understanding, right, Clint, only the people that live in that area were really engaged and involved in all that planning. Nobody else was notified that those planning meetings were happening right across the whole city. So this is the opportunity in this particular meeting for the broader public across the whole city to actually give input about it, even though they don't always live in that neighborhood, or maybe they couldn't be a part of that process on the ground, right? Am I right about that, Clint?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So the notifications that we sent out, really anybody could have been part of the plan because it was sent out as notified on the city website. If people went to the website and saw that there's a meeting for the Southeast Ogden plan, they could come and participate in it. The notices that we sent out went to people that live there, so people that would be renting as well as people that own property there. So they would have stakeholders that would have a say in the process. So one of the comments that I would make on all of this process is to make sure that people understand that this is not the city's plan. This is the community's plan for their community. As a staff member, what we were listed to do is to kind of facilitate, provide an environment where people can make comment, and we take those comments and make them into statements and objectives and goals the best that we could, and make sure that that's in congruence with what the community was after.
Yeah, and I certainly love you and appreciate all of your work. So I don't want you to feel like you should I just think we get feedback from the broader community and just have to kind of things at the same time.
Chair, could I add one more comment?
Yeah.
I wanted to, I do want to recognize the work that Clint did, because it's been quite some time since we, asked that our planning staff put this kind of an effort together and reach out to the community. And he has absolutely lived up to that in every way. And we heard that from a lot of the residents that were involved from the local area. And so, Clint, I just really appreciate the work that you did on this plan. It's clear that there's tons of consensus in here, and I really want to honor the process that you shepherded through this process. You just did an excellent job, and it's no surprise that we get to the end of this process and there's this one sticking point. I think we all knew this sticking point was coming, but I want you to know, from me personally, that I really appreciate the effort that you put in to engage with people and to truly listen to them, and that their feedback has definitely come back to us in terms of the effort that you put forward. So regardless of where this goes, either tonight or the next time we discuss it or whatever happens, it should be known that you did an excellent job. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciate that, and I'll mention that to our staff members that helped in the process, Greg and Joe and Amber, and at the time Laura. Thank you.
Can I follow up with what Ben has to say there? As I see the community plan, this will affect this whole community, not only a year, 2 years, could be affected 10, 15 years down the road. It's a footprint by which we look at what's going to happen in that area of the city. And so it is very important. It is very crucial. It's like building a home. You look at your home and you say, gosh, if I would have done this, it would have been better. I'm not saying that if we do something different with this plan that it will be better, but at least we will have a better understanding of how we want that community to look and how the community will react to the plan. It's their plan. It's not the city's plan. It's the community's plan. And we have to make sure that we understand what their wants and needs and their desires are. And if their desires are to have ADUs, and that's what we hear, and that's what the study and the information shows, then that's what we need to look at for this plan. But the plan will be a footprint by which that community is going to develop in the next 10, 15 years.
Thanks. So is anybody considering a motion of some kind, or?
Chair, it sounds like the consensus of the council is to table this. I think that the 4th is our next meeting. That's 3 weeks away. Is that adequate for everybody to get their self to where they feel like they could vote on this?
And let's check with the staff. Yeah, let me check with Ben. I can tell he wants to say something.
So just to talk about process and procedure a little bit, the date we chose in anticipation of you wanting to table this is August 11th. So it is out a little ways, but with the couple of weeks where you're not having regular meetings, August 4th is fairly booked up already. August 11th seems like the best day. So in hearing that, that's what we would recommend is you table it to that day, as opposed to the next item on your agenda, which is where we recommended that you extend it. In this case, we're recommending that you table it to a date certain. Also, I tend to be hearing that there may be some appetite for some alternative language. So I think we'll also try to come up with something that council members may want to fall back on if they're not comfortable with the way it's written. I'll work with planning, of course, and legal, and see if we can come up with an alternative that you can consider if you would like. You certainly wouldn't have to, but that would be an option for you. So that's our recommendation, is you table to August 11th.
Well, with that in mind, Chair, I will make a motion concerning Ordinance 2020-30 that we table that to August 11th.
I second it.
Okay, so I've got a motion by Councilmember Heyer and a second by Councilmember Stevens. And would this be a voice vote?
That's a voice vote.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I thought it was. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. Thanks. So we'll table that. And we'll give the other council members some homework.
That's good.
All right, we have some new business. Glenn Symes, our council deputy director, is going to talk with us about the communications plan for proposed general plan amendments for the airport.
Sure, thank you. So I'll be quick. I don't have a presentation or anything. So this is an item, as I just mentioned a minute ago, that you had extended from your last meeting last week. And per your rules and norms, when the council extends an item, council staff will come back at the next available meeting and talk about the communications plan and timelines for the item. So just to clarify, this is the general plan amendments that relate to the airport. So these are amendments that take place in the transportation section of the general plan and not the airport master plan. So the airport master plan does not include language for historic preservation of the tower and the terminal. That language is in the general plan amendment, which is this item. So what the council did last week was request that this item be extended and request that you all talk about this in a work session rather than specifically striking the language, which was one option we talked about last week. So we've got that scheduled for August 4th for a work session to discuss the historic preservation language in the general plan amendments that were originally adopted on June 23rd and then reconsidered last week and extended last week. So once we get direction from the council on that through the work session, we will renotice this. We'll most likely do some outreach on social media and try to get the word out about what this is and when this would be back on an agenda once we do get direction from the council.
Thanks for that, Glenn. And I did see the pictures Councilmember Heyer sent to us. We can check those out too. Any other questions or comments for Glenn?
On those pictures, I could give a little narrative to each one of those and send it back out to you again. I just sent the big block to you. I'm not sure they're a lot of good to you that way. Whatever you want, I'm happy to do.
Maybe we'll ask, if council members have questions about them, they can reach out to you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, Rich, are you in the pictures too?
No, I was behind the camera.
Yeah. Okay. Just wondered.
Great. Up next, we have public comment. Brandon, would you mind explaining to people again how they would do that?
Not at all. Thank you, Chair. So if you would like to address the council regarding any topic, now is the time to do so. And to get in the queue, you would need to use the raise hand feature found within Zoom. You can do this within the, looks like people are figuring it out pretty quickly. You can do this. There's a button to raise your hand at the bottom of the app. And then if you're joining us via telephone, doesn't look like we have any people joining us for telephone, but for future reference, if you are joining us via telephone, you can dial *9 and that will raise your hand. I did see that Taylor Knuth had his hand raised first, so we will go ahead and start with him. If you wouldn't mind stating your name for the record and then keeping your comments to 3 minutes.
Thanks, Brandon. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Taylor Knuth. I am a resident of Ogden City. I am also the chair of the Ogden City Diversity Commission. I just wanted to comment on an item that Councilmember Stevens brought up during the work session related to the Marshall White Center Advisory Board and the selection process of the advisory board members themselves. I've had a few residents and people invested in the Marshall White Center reach out to me and the Diversity Commission in regards to the selection process for the advisory board I know you guys talked at length about it in the actual work session, but I do think it's important to bring it up during this public comment section because I know that the Marshall White Center serves a critical cultural and historical significance within not only the community of Ogden, but within our multicultural communities and our neighborhoods surrounding the center itself. I'm just joining the call today to emphasize the importance of a fair, a transparent, and a very openly communicable, constant communication going on process for the Marshall White Advisory Board. I have yet to hear of an experience of any of those 17 people that applied for the Marshall White Center Advisory Board where they were even notified that their application was received. I think that this is a fairly egregious oversight on behalf of the selection process and a process that the people that have applied for the Marshall White Center Advisory Board have expressed that they don't trust. I did not apply for the Marshall White Center Advisory Board. I do know several people who have, and I just think it's important to stress to the council that any process that's not fair, transparent, equitable, and accessible from the beginning, from the get-go, from the minute that application is submitted, is not a process that anybody should be standing by at this point. We should be asking for more in regards to these processes to ensure that representation is included on this critical board that will decide, as Mark Johnson, the Chief Administrative Officer, pointed out in the work session. This body will provide the strategy long-term for the center. And if it's not a transparent process from the get-go, it is not one that I feel that our community will be able to rally behind. It's not one that I feel like our community will be able to support as that body continues to implement and suggest strategies for further development of the Marshall White Center Advisory Board. So I just appreciate your guys' time. I also wanted to make a quick comment on the community plan. I would just ask you guys to consider who's making these plans. I saw the same names repeated on those committees several times. And when we create community plans, they should be buy-in for everybody, not just the people who have the time to be involved in a board. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. I'm not sure if I guess I'm forgetting my etiquette here. I'm not sure if the administration wanted to comment on that at all.
We'll take all the notes and respond at the end.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Caldwell.
Next up, we have Amy Wicks. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Amy Wicks, Ogden resident. I'm going to say some harsh words that need to be said. Do your jobs. If you can't do this job, step aside so someone else can. The first part of doing that job is understanding your responsibilities as a council member. And with our form of government, there are checks and balances. You as council members determine the direction of the city by establishing policies and setting a budget. If a program or service is discontinued or significantly changed, there should be transparency. You should know before it pops up in a newspaper article. You should be part of the discussion. You shouldn't be reading that recycling has been dumped at the landfill in a newspaper article. If there is difficulty with providing a city service, this absolutely should be discussed as part of your budget process that ends every year in June. You just finished this process. Steps could have been taken to ensure that the things that cities should be doing can be accomplished within the budget. And I realize there are a lot of challenging things going on in this world that need to be addressed, but that's no excuse for failing to make sure important budget-related discussions occurred this year. You knew last year there were some issues with the recycling program. The mayor knew it, Mark Johnson knew it, Jay Louder knew it, I'm absolutely disgusted with what's gone on. How many person hours have been wasted and how many gallons of water have been wasted in preparing and sorting recyclable materials to be placed in a bin that only ends up in a landfill? How long have our diligently sorted recyclables been going to the landfill before some overpaid city bureaucrat decided to let citizens and the council know that recycling is not happening here? Our city lacks any real leadership on this and other important issues. People elected Mike Caldwell to run the city and make important decisions, not Mark Johnson. People elected you, members of the council, to set policy and adopt a budget and to hold the administration to that. We pay for recycling as part of our refuse bill. If the domestic recycle business is not sustainable because we're shipping our stuff to China, why not support innovators that are finding ways to make use of our recyclables here instead of lying to us and dumping those things off at the landfill? If the existing company contracted to provide recycling services cannot fulfill the terms of the contract, administration needs to find another company to do it. Not trucking our recycling to a landfill, not discontinuing the service without robust public discussion or even notice. I'm appalled at the violation of public trust and lack of transparency surrounding this. So please do your job and take steps to ensure that the recycling program is fully reinstated. It's irresponsible to continue to allow useful materials to be sent to the landfill. Do your job and hold administration responsible for this gross violation of public trust.
Thanks, Amy. Would anybody like to comment about that? Okay, so we'll go on to the next caller.
Up next, I believe we have Heath. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Heath Sato. First off, I wanted to vouch for what Taylor said. I applied for the Marshall White Board and Advisory Board, and I'd heard zero confirmation about that. I wanted to make a quick comment about the ADUs. We keep saying that this is about what the community wants, but this housing issue affects the whole city. So I think we need to talk about more than just what this community wants. So what I wanted to talk about was what Amy just talked about, transparency within this administration. A lack of transparency is a form of deception, and if we are deceived about what's going on in our city, no one can be held accountable for the decisions made in our names. Last March, we were told that recycling would briefly be going to the landfill as the cost of recycling went up 47%. Mark Johnson decided that instead of asking us to pay an estimated 12 cents more a month that this would cost at the time, our recycling would be going to a landfill instead. At the time, Johnson told KSL.com that, quote, Ogden City is committed to offering a recycling program. After 2 weeks, it was claimed that Ogden City's recycling program is back. That's the last we heard about it. Now we learn that this administration has been hiding the fact that our recycling has been dumped in landfills for the better part of a year and continues to this day. I am more than upset that the recycling we have made the effort to do for the last year has all ended up in a landfill. Nobody in this administration that knew about it felt the need to inform us of this. Many of us make purchasing decisions based upon how we can recycle the packaging, etc. Not telling us what was going on is a blatant violation of the public trust. I would like to see greater transparency, not just in this issue, but many. Better communication and more accountability out of this administration moving forward on this and all other issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Rose. If you would state your full name for the record and keep your minutes to 3 minutes. The time is yours. So this is another situation, Chair Burqa, where this person would need to be promoted to a panelist to be able to speak to us.
Sure, we'll give it a shot.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. My name is Rose.
You might be breaking up. I don't know if it's just.
Today. Can you hear me now?
I think it's better now. Yeah.
Okay. I'm also commenting about the recycling program. Today's Standard Examiner article and yesterday's press release explains that recycled earth was violating its conditional use permit because trucks were being directed to dump outdoors. And that's why, since March 3rd, recycling has been going to the landfill. It sounds like the decrease in demand for recycled materials has caused recycled earth not to process as much in the past, which means to me that this is an unsustainable problem because I imagine they could only have a certain amount of structures so that we aren't having to dump outdoors. But they're still accepting Hooper, Roy, Marriott, Slaterville, and Huntsville recyclables. So it seems a little strange, and I wonder, I have 3 questions for you. In the Standard also, in April of 2019, there was an article titled Recycled Earth Route Seeks Focus on Low Cost of Recycling, Not Just Fee Hikes. And the article has photos showing recycling being stored and sorted in the open air, which makes me wonder, why was it March 3rd of this year that conditional use permit was a violation and not any other time before? Second, how close are we to a short-term solution to allow recyclables to reach recycled earth? What alternatives are on the table? Does recycled earth actually need to build structures, or what needs to happen? And then third, in the city press release, it says, if the recycling provider raises their dumping fees, Ogden City must determine how to absorb those increases or pass those costs on in the form of a higher monthly refuse charge. So I wonder what progress has been made there. What has the council done, or what departments have taken action to get an estimate for a recycling rate to get our blue bins contents taken to a recycling facility? Back in that April 2019 article, there was data from South Ogden showing that the increase for recycled earth would raise the South Ogden monthly recycling fee that it looks like Ogden does not have to pay, but it looks like it would have taken their $4.55 fee up, or it would have increased it by $1 or $2 a month. And I would be happy to pay with that if our recycling could go to a recycling plant. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. Great questions.
Next, we will hear from Angel Castillo. Please state your name for the record and limit your time to 3 minutes.
Hi, Angel Castillo. I'm here to talk about recycling, as I'm sure a lot of people are. The Facebook post that I shared regarding Ogden halting recycling had 263 likes, 150 comments, and 156 shares. So people are upset, to say the least. And I'm most upset that we haven't been recycling in almost a year, and the administration felt we didn't need to know about that. I mean, that is completely disingenuous. We have a sustainability committee that council member White worked very hard to bring to fruition, and they didn't know about this. And I'm also under the impression that none of the council members knew about it either. And I'm sure you remember the public support for HB 411. So how dare the administration think that this is not a high priority thing for citizens and that they would want to know? I fully understand that recycled earth tips fees have increased due to the market demand change for recycling materials. Recycling materials are a commodity that can vary month to month, and recycled earth posts those charge fluctuations monthly. What I don't understand is the administration not asking the public whether or not they would be willing to pay an additional charge to recycle. In fact, Carrie Lynn Burke from Weber State University had a research project in 2019 exploring Ogden community desire for recycling and what they would be willing to pay. You can find her paper at tinyurl.com/Ogden Recycling. And spoiler alert, most people are willing to pay up to $5. When I spoke with Recycled Earth yesterday, their fee is currently just under 82 cents per week and starting to drop well under the $5 additional fee people would consider to have recycling. And I am aware that everything we put in the blue bin doesn't get recycled. That depends on the market demand. And you know what? I don't care. If only half of it stays out of the landfill, I'm good with that. If only a quarter stays out of the landfill, I'm good with that. It's important that we make the effort, because little things add up to big things. Plastic is forever, and any amount of trash that stays out of the landfill is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. I echo everybody else's comments in that I am disappointed yet again at the lack of transparency from the administration regarding this. I am offended that they're treating our community like children, that will tell you what you need to know when we know that recycling is important to us. We have a sustainability community. We show up for HB 411. This is a big deal. And I need to know what's happening and why is this happening and how did this happen? And this shouldn't happen again. We are willing to explore different solutions, and I'm just incensed that the administration made these decisions without consulting any of our community members. Shame on you. Thank you.
Next is Montana. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is Montana Evans again, commenting on recycling as well. And just keeping in mind that sustainability is something that can definitely get pricey, but it's something that we have to create the room in our budget for, not something that we can look at and think if we have the money, but where is the money that we can allocate towards it? And absolutely, as a member of the community, I am also willing to have my personal expenses increase in order to keep our recycling program going. And following up on what some of the other people have commented on so far is that the transparency that we need from our city council is so important. And it's a great way to not only develop more trust and communication between the community and our city leaders, but it is vital to the role that you all play as city leaders, including, you know, the different councils and the mayor and everything else. We want to stay informed and to be able to make our own choices. If there's a reason that the recycling program has to halt, then inform us so that we can be in the know of what's happening, as well as make our own decisions on like getting our recyclables taken care of properly. So I would also like to know if there's any potential date as to when this will be taken care of, or a way to remain updated on it so that we know what to expect. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming back and sticking with us, Montana.
Hayden Moss, the floor is now yours. Please state your name for the record and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Peyton Moss. I live on 36th Street here by Weber State. I wanted to make a couple comments. The first one, according to research that I have done, that recycling is not beneficial to the environment, nor is it beneficial to the public, and it's a service that should be eliminated from the city planning and budget. I think that those funds could be better used at the green waste facility, as those people are usually the ones that are going around collecting recycling anyway, and the green waste facility is already underfunded. If anyone was looking for solutions, I think that taking away the blue bin in favor of having 2 garbage cans and then having public recycling for cardboard and plastic as the glass is done would be a cost-effective solution. Furthermore, I think it would be a better route to take to create incentives for companies to not use recyclable materials in the city, no plastics, no cardboards, and encourage different packaging that can either be broken down easily in the landfill or otherwise reused in the home. And the last point I wanted to talk about was sidewalks around the university would be a grand idea, and supporting ADUs, or furthermore, eliminating the single-family home ADU distinction and allowing multiple families to live in a single home all throughout Ogden would be a more cost-effective solution than trying to create an ordinance difference that requires a lot of paperwork and funding on the city side. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks, Peyton. I don't think I've heard that argument before. I'll have to look that up. Great. Well, not sure if the mayor or Mark Johnson would like to make any comments specific to these comments, or just do your general comments. I'm not sure what you would like to do.
I'll just do my general comments at this point. I mean, we've heard a lot from both sides of this, and for people to imply that we've tried to mislead the public or lie or do anything else, I think is tremendously unfair. Recycling is a priority for me, it's a priority for the city, and it's a priority for my personal family. I'll say that both my daughters have participated on the sustainability committee at Ogden High School, and they're very worried about this. This is a conversation we have all the time. And as has been mentioned in these public comments, just because we were delivering to recycled earth didn't mean that that actually was being recycled. And the Planning Commission set some very strict and clear guidelines for what they would be comfortable with and okay with as that material was delivered there. We found that they were not complying with that, and so we had to make some changes. I think it would be ignorant to say that the market for recycling is a lot different now than it was a number of years ago, and that's a dynamic thing that we're looking at and we're trying to figure out. We've been aggressively pursuing other options. We've had plans to visit very new technologies that would take almost all of the recycling in, instead of, as has been mentioned, they're okay with maybe 25% of it being recycled or maybe 50% of it being recycled. We're looking at technologies that would recycle 90% of the materials, including green waste. And we had plans to go out this May to visit those technologies. We've been working on this hard for a while, and unfortunately, we don't have the ability to travel and to go look at those technologies. So we are very committed to having a robust recycling program. And like a lot of others, we're working through the ins and outs of what's out there in the technology. We are absolutely not deceiving the public or doing anything else. Occasionally, markets shift and things happen, and we have to make adjustments and look at that. But I can tell you, for me personally, I'm very committed to that. My family is very committed to that. We still separate everything. We think it's important that we continue to do that. And we're looking at other technologies that are out there. I take great offense to people saying that we have manipulated and lied to the community and everything else. Sometimes these kinds of things happen, and we've talked to the council about the dynamics in the market that's out there, what we're trying to do, what we're looking at, and how aggressive we want to be. And if some of these technologies come out, we'll be one of the most aggressive recycling communities in the United States of America. And we're committed to continuing this. It just needs to make fiscal sense, and we need to know that what we're getting promised when we sign a contract with the recycler, that promise is being fulfilled. And so that's a frustration we have, just along with everyone else that just called us out and beat us up for what is or what isn't happening. And we share a lot of the same frustration, but we're committed to it, and we'll continue working on it. And we'll be transparent with you and with the public. There was no intent to deceive or to do anything else with this.
Thanks so much, Mayor. And I do recognize that, and we've been talking about that great new technology and possibly visiting places to explore that more. So I definitely appreciate that. I just wonder if you don't mind if I ask just a couple questions, because we didn't talk about it in the work session, because we thought we'd talk about it a little bit here. Some folks, I guess one of my understandings was, because I have heard periodically throughout this period that we were having challenges and kind of trying to work through it. But I guess I didn't really understand that we weren't recycling at all. And I don't know if that's just a misconception with the newspaper article, that from March until now we haven't used it at all. Can you clarify that just a little bit?
Yeah, so the contract wasn't being fulfilled, and we pulled that and had to take everything we had to the area that we could control it. One of the issues we have to be completely direct with them not fulfilling the terms of the contract, is that you get a whole bunch of seagulls that affects the other businesses that are around that area. We've had bird strikes at the airport. It's close to the airport. There are a lot of issues that come with this that a lot of people don't want to really talk about or consider. So public safety is obviously one of the things that we take as paramount through the whole thing. And as we delayed that and took our waste stream into the areas that we could ensure public safety, that was an internal decision, and we had hoped to get this taken care of well before it was now. Like I said, we've been meeting with the county, we've been meeting with a whole bunch of other community partners to say, what are our options, and let's look at some of these. And we had plans in place to go visit some of these other technologies and look at ways to do this. And waste is a dynamic issue. You know, the county used to do all the recycling. They stopped doing the recycling. We had to go outside to do recycling. Right now we have Logan. So if we're looking at recycling where we can help control what's happening in the public safety and the contract that they fulfilled, the only two other contractors right now are in Logan and in Salt Lake. And there's an enormous shipping cost, trucking cost that's associated with taking all of our recycling waste to Logan or to Salt Lake. And so we're looking at options here locally. I can tell you that we're looking at a number, before we look at that dynamic technology that could help change this, that we're hoping to see come online, that we're getting bids right now from other recycling groups that could come in and take care of what we have. I mean, it breaks my heart, like I said, and my family's, that the contract wasn't fulfilled and we just couldn't stay with that. And so we're looking at all of our options right now, but as you all know, as council members, sometimes that just takes some time to work through. And what we had in line and planned and in place to totally upscale this changed a little bit, and we're still working through that. We're still committed to recycling. My family's committed to recycling. The city is. That's why we kept all of our trucks. We kept encouraging people to separate. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to work through some of these dynamic issues.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is we haven't been taking it since March.
Correct.
And then just one other question people had for me, and I just don't know the answer, is I really do appreciate the idea. Once now we've trained people to start recycling and separating and everything, we want to keep that going. But some people are concerned that then that kind of doubles our cost because we have 2 trucks on the road, and I don't really know if that plays out that way, if it doubles the cost, if we're still collecting both but taking it all to landfill.
So I wasn't here when the original recycling program came on place. And so I believe, from what I've been told, that was in 2002, 2003. And the recycling paid for itself. So we didn't put additional cost on the public for recycling because as we gathered that material, there was a market to pay for all of that. And that was the case for almost a decade. And it's just been in the last couple of years where at one point we had 50 container trucks just kind of drifting around waiting for China to reopen their borders. And the market and the businesses that were built around that market collapsed, and everybody scrambled to find out what to do next. And so, yeah, cardboard, aluminum, and some plastics are still okay, but in a very narrow, limited area. And so, as was mentioned, yeah, probably 75%, if not 100% of what we're delivering to our recycling contractor just got scooped up and put back into the landfill already. And that's not something we were really okay with. We wanted to know where we were through the whole stream of that. And that's why we looked at other options, and we'll continue to look at other options. And we have some good ones on the table that we've done some research with. It's just going to take some time to ferret that out. We did not want to go with a technology that we didn't get a chance to put eyes on. I don't pretend to be a waste stream professional, but Jay is, and Jay's really good at that. And he was one of the ones that was going to go look at that and look at the technology and vet that out and say, yeah, this really works, or this is probably an oversell. And we just didn't get a chance to go look at that. And we're still committed to that once we can travel and put eyes on and hands on that technology. But that's kind of where we're at right now.
Great. I don't know if any other council members have questions about that.
So, Mayor, are we looking at a new contract or not with Logan and Salt Lake?
We are. Well, we've put RFPs out for a number of people to respond to, but the cost to truck it all to either Logan or Salt Lake is, it seems cost prohibitive, but we can put that out if those are only two options. We can put that out to the public as was requested and see what people would be willing to pay. Some people have said, I'd be willing to pay $5 a bin a month. You have a whole bunch of others that would be absolutely unwilling to do that. So that's a community conversation we can have. But we were really hoping that some of these new technologies would come online and we could continue to do that at very little or no cost to the community.
Yeah, we might have to do something kind of as a stopgap before, that happens, I guess.
We agree.
Mayor, is there any kind of a expected timeline as to how long it might take us to check out those new technologies? I know there was 2 different companies that were kind of courting us. Is there do we have any kind of an idea when we can check those out and decide whether, well, even at that point, they're going to have to build a plant. So
yeah,
it would take time to build the plant, but it would be a privately owned plant instead of a county or city owned, which is a good thing to have a private business here doing that. But Councilman, if you can answer the question and when we get to travel again, I just got a note today that my daughter, who's supposed to leave in a couple of days for out-of-state university, the state just shut down everything and she's going 100% online, and she called in tears earlier. So when we can travel and go put eyes on and hands on that technology, we'll have a much better idea of what to do. That's that whole point of measuring twice and cutting once. We don't want to just say, oh, it sounds great on paper, bring it in, let's go, and then not have it work. We wanted to make sure this is a big enough shift in what we would be doing with recyclables that we feel like we need to go have eyes and hands on that before we could make any decisions and push. And it's going to be a collaborative effort with the county and the cities. It's Ogden's the biggest waste provider for the transfer station by far. And so where we go with it is by a good chance where a lot of the others will go with it as well. And so we want to make sure that it works for everybody.
Yeah, my crystal ball's broke. I thought yours was still working though.
As has been mentioned and pointed out tonight, nobody has a crystal ball.
I know that
we can with the information we have.
Yeah, I know we'll want to be a part of continuing the conversation. And I think, I guess, just to kind of close out this topic for tonight, you all are still recommending that people put things in the blue bin, or should we, kind of deal with things on our own for a while and then get notified when we should go back to doing that?
We think it's a great habit to be in. And, we don't know when we're going to be able to change and when some of this will come up. Like I mentioned, we have RFPs out to a couple of other recycling people right now that might be able to come in and make that work. So, this is something the community's worked on and trained themselves to do for a long time. And if we just say, no, it's all gone and there's no hope, then that's not functional at all. And we think everybody should be in the mindset of recycling and working on that. And my family certainly will. And until we get better data and information, I encourage everybody to continue to do that. That's our goal and priority. And so until we get better answers and we figure some of that out, I encourage everybody to continue to do that. And the reality is that almost everything they put in for the last little while wasn't just Ogden City. It was Recycled Earth and our contractor that just kind of scooped and dumped because there was not a big market for it. And so we hope that the market will shift. We hope that this new technology will come online. And we encourage everybody to continue doing what they're doing because we do think it'll come back. And I think it's really important.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question. What part should we ask the Sustainability Committee maybe to play in some of this research or in some of these recommendations? Would it be appropriate? I know it's kind of happening right in the moment, but would their expertise be helpful?
We would love their input and feedback on that. That's why that committee was created. We don't pretend to have all the answers. And we love that kind of feedback and participation. So we're happy to share what information we have with them. They can go do some due diligence, give us their thoughts on it, give us their thoughts or fears or excitement on it. The green waste site is still robustly going. I mean, we have a firm commitment here to stay in front of all of that. It's just a weird spot in the market and technology and with some of the vendors that are out there right now and able to do this kind of work.
Well, thank you. Thanks for indulging me in so many questions. Council members, does anybody have any comments they'd like to make?
Can I just add, I appreciated all the participation in the Southeast Community Plan. I live in that area. I appreciated Clint's work and the Planning Commission's work and everyone else. I know that's an emotional issue. There were some comments that may have been jaded by people that live in that area. I can tell you that we haven't participated in that at all, and I think that's unfair. I think they really wanted to have the community participate in that and help build that plan, and they've done a great job of that. And I think they've been really unbiased as they've worked through some of the issues that were around that. And I just want to thank them. It's been a trying number of months for everybody that's been involved in a lot of different emotional issues. And so I thank them for their work and their patience and diligence.
Thanks. Any other comments?
I was just going to say that I came into the evening with a lot of questions about the issue. But the questions from the community, the press release that the administration put out, the answers that the mayor has given tonight have been really helpful. But so I hope the council and administration, and I know the community, will be taking our eyes off the ball on this at all. So look forward to continuing to address the issue.
You have my full commitment on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
It's been a pretty long night. Anybody else have any comments? Well, great. Yeah, and I certainly do appreciate all of that work, and I really appreciate the community engagement around the Southeast Community Plan. So many people on that call, talked about how much they love Ogden, and we don't always hear all those comments all the time. So it was nice to get people that are so passionate about the community and wanting to build it and make it better for everybody. So I think we can adjourn unless anybody else has anything.
Yeah, I just had a real quick comment and just to follow up on that. And one of the things that I find, maybe it's just this COVID time, but I really appreciate people being able to reach out to us and still be able to, use the emails. And I think that we would not have had, I don't know how many people we had online. I think we had 60 people online tonight. I actually think that being able to be online has actually been able to have more people be engaged. And I really appreciate people taking the time to hang in there with us. And these are weird times, but I don't know. I don't think we would have had that many people show up at our council chambers. So this has been nice.
Yeah, I agree. And even though I'm saying now it's 9:30, that first 2 hour, all those comments went pretty fast. The time went pretty quickly. So good. Well, thanks. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, please.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Heyer, a second by Councilmember White to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. Well, have a good night. Thanks so much for your help, staff members. I hope you don't go into the office or get on your computer too early in the morning. Thank you.
Thanks for everything you've done, Angela.
Thank you all.